Husband discovers wife's affair, pretends ignorance to plan ultimate revenge after being cheated on. Consider this: in major events, it's often the small details that can make or break them. Take, for instance, the 1986 Challenger disaster, where a cheap O-ring led to the loss of 7 lives and hundreds of millions of dollars. Similarly, a tiny blood clot, barely visible under a microscope, can be fatal by blocking blood flow to a critical part of the brain. Even a small patch of ice on the road can cause a vehicle to spin out of control and result in a deadly crash. The list goes on. Seemingly insignificant factors can have devastating consequences for significant endeavors. Marriage certainly falls into the category of important undertakings. I, for one, hold my marriage in high regard. Married for just over 8 years to my lovely wife, April. We have 2 amazing boys, Chris and Charles. While I didn't earn a college degree, my skills as a mechanic have provided us with a comfortable life and a spacious home. Despite the long hours I put into my job, the financial stability it brings makes it worthwhile. My marriage has always been the highlight of my life, and I've worked diligently to support my family. Unfortunately, it's often the small things that can unravel such significant commitments. In my case, it was a tiny blood vessel in my brain that caused the downfall. Its proximity to another vessel led to swelling, triggering a debilitating migraine headache. I experienced one such episode on a particularly fateful day. The symptoms were familiar: sensitivity to light, escalating sounds, and unbearable smells. The sudden onset of excruciating pain caught me off guard. Without my Imitrex inhaler, I had no means to alleviate the agony. While I had pills on hand, they weren't as effective and would take time to ease the pain to a manageable level, rendering me unable to work. I stumbled into my boss's office and delivered the grim news. He immediately sprang into action, summoning his secretary Penny and instructing her to get me home safely, insisting that I not drive. "For heaven's sake, go now," he urged. With Penny's assistance, my boss carefully guided me out of the office and down the hallway towards the exit. Once outside, Penny helped me lean against the wall, shielding my eyes from the harsh light as she made her way to her car. I kept my eyes shut tightly and pressed my hands against my temples, trying to dull the throbbing pain. As we drove, my vision blurred, and the light became unbearable, forcing me to keep my eyes shut. The sounds around me turned into an overwhelming buzz, and the foul smell made my stomach churn. Thankfully, Penny knew the way to my house, so I didn't need to give directions. It felt like an eternity, but eventually she pulled up outside my home, helped me out of the car, and guided me inside. I followed her lead, barely able to walk on my own. Once in the kitchen, I instructed Penny to retrieve my inhaler from the refrigerator. She placed it in my hand, held it steady as I administered it into my nose, inhaling deeply as the medication entered my bloodstream. Then I asked her to assist me to the living room adjacent to the kitchen and help me onto the sofa. I requested that she draw the blinds and turn off all the lights, which she promptly did. After a few minutes, I could already sense some relief creeping in, so I assured Penny that she could leave. Gratefully, I thanked her for her help and welcomed the peace and quiet as she departed. I must have drifted off to sleep quickly as the pain eased because I woke later to the sound of voices. The room was shrouded in darkness, signaling that it was likely later in the day. When I recalled my surroundings, instantly, I realized the pain had vanished, leaving me feeling sore but relieved from the remnants of the migraine. Taking a moment to sit up cautiously, I waited, half expecting the pain to return, but it didn't. She had left, thank God. In the dimness, I recognized the voices of my wife April and her neighbor friend Robin. It seemed they were unaware of my presence, given the darkness and the still-off lights. Perhaps April assumed I was resting after coming home early. Though my car wasn't parked in the driveway, she probably hadn't realized I was here at all. Maybe I could surprise them both. I rose quietly, planning to sneak to the door and then make my presence known. But as I tuned into their conversation, "Come on, April, how was it? Was it as good as before? Give me the details, girl." It was amazing. I felt like I was in heaven. Even better than last time, I swear. Almost mind-blowing. The best physical engaging ever. Better than Chris? Better than your husband? Hell yes. I adore Chris. But he never made me feel like that. Never. I would let him do those things. He'd think I'm a strumpet. But Carl, he knows, and I like it. Can't wait for next time. Aren't you afraid Chris will find out? Have you considered the consequences? Chris will never know. And even if he did, so what? He's too nice to leave me. He wouldn't risk losing the kids. I'd take them in a heartbeat with a good lawyer. This isn't like you, April. It's worrying. I think you're making a big mistake. I love Chris, truly. But I won't give up what I have with Carl. I want both, the passion with Carl and the love with Chris. I need both, and I won't let go. I've had my fill. Though the migraine subsided, the ache in my heart was far worse. It gripped me so tightly that my stomach knotted, and each breath felt like a struggle. A ringing filled my ears, and my pulse thundered in my head. Fear surged through me as if a heart attack loomed, and I clung to the doorframe until some semblance of calm returned to my body. Still, I kept my presence hidden, but with each returning moment of control, fury simmered within me, threatening to boil over. With resolve, I straightened and stepped into the illuminated kitchen, shattering the silence. Robin was the first to notice me, her eyes widening in shock as she fell silent. April, catching Robin's reaction, turned to see me, her expression shifting from contentment to astonishment, then to dread, and finally to anger, all in an instant. Pushing her chair back, April rose to confront me. "How much did you hear? Why were you lurking and spying on me?" she demanded. I met her gaze in silence, then glanced at Robin, who wasted no time in excusing herself. "I need to go. Pete and I can take care of the boys if you need time. I'll call you later," she said before hurrying out the side door. I watched her departure wordlessly. Left alone, I turned my attention back to April. Once the woman I cherished unconditionally for 8 blissful years. 8 years I thought would stretch into eternity, where we'd grow old together. But tonight, that expectation shattered. There would be no forever for us. April ended it all tonight. Where are the boys? What were you up to while you were having your fun with your lover? Did you even think about them? Or were you too busy enjoying yourself with someone else while leaving them unattended? Now I'm composed and collected, though the pain still lingers, sharp and deep. It'll take a while for it to ease. April's face twisted with anger, masking her beauty with ugliness. Perhaps that mask was the real April, hidden beneath the surface all along. She retorted, "The boys are with Carly. Robin and I went shopping and Pete watched over them, and I wasn't with anyone else, just Robin." With that statement, she seemed to feel victorious. The anger on her face morphed into satisfaction. Finally realizing I'd been at home, she inquired, "What are you doing here? Where's your car, and why were you sitting in the dark? Were you spying on me, trying to catch me in the act?" "I came home early with a terrible migraine. George asked Penny to drive me home because I couldn't handle the light. I took my Imitrex and fell asleep. I've been here ever since." A queasiness etched in my stomach and a strong urge to vomit surged through me. I rose and hurried to the bathroom. "Your voice woke me, and what I heard made me sick. I need the bathroom." With those words, I dashed to the bathroom, attempting to expel the contents of my stomach. It wasn't entirely successful, but my body certainly tried its best. I settled onto the bathroom floor, finding relief as my body gradually relaxed against the cool porcelain. Finally, my stomach calmed and my breathing steadied. The sweat on my face dried as the nausea faded away. After a few moments, I rose, splashing water on my face and rinsing out my mouth. Once the trembling subsided and I regained some composure, I returned to the kitchen, where April sat, gazing out the window. "I'm going to fetch the boys and put them to bed tonight." Brushing past her, I exited, making my way next door to the Andersons. Pete and Robin Anderson were not only our neighbors but also our closest friends. We had shared countless evenings together, chatting and enjoying drinks. Best friends, I bitterly mused. I wondered what Pete knew. I should have asked. Knocking on their back door, I entered to find Robin seated at the kitchen table, engaged in conversation with her husband. I sensed she had told him. He looked up with pity in his eyes as I entered, while Robin appeared visibly uneasy. "I've come to get the boys. Are they ready to head home?" I bypassed Pete, heading to the living room, where I presumed the boys were with Carly, their teenage daughter. They were huddled over a puzzle, Carly watching over them as I entered. She greeted me with a smile. "Hey, Mr. Phillips, are you here for them?" Upon my nod, she said, "I'll grab their jackets." I stood there watching them, overwhelmed by a wave of sadness. These scenes, once filled with everyday joy, now bore the mark of infidelity. The innocence of family life shattered by the selfishness of adults, in many cases irreparably so. This felt like one of those times. "Thanks, Carly. I'll be in the kitchen when they're ready." I returned to the kitchen, where Pete and Robin remained seated. I glanced at Robin, then at Pete. "Did you both know? Were you aware she cheated on me, Pete? Did it bring you some twisted satisfaction knowing while we were together? Did it give you some sick thrill?" My anger fueled my words, harsher than necessary, but I needed answers from my dear friends. I should have sensed something. Pete shot a glance at Robin, his anger evident, before replying. "I swear, buddy, I had no clue. If I had known, I'd have told you right away. I can't believe my wife knew and kept it from me. It's despicable. You don't deserve this. I won't apologize for her, but I'm here for you if you need me." His gaze hardened as he looked at his wife. I believed him. He would have confided in me if he had known. So that was Robin and April's secret. Thank you. Robin, I sneered. Thanks for making me a laughingstock, a betrayed man, a fool who didn't need to know his wife was fooling around with another guy. I hope that sits well with you, knowing what you knew while thinking of me. I turned as I noticed Carly approaching, hastily putting on a smile as the boys emerged, each clutching a cookie. I silently prayed Carly hadn't overheard my last words, but the look on her face suggested otherwise. This marked the last time Robin would spend with my boys. That much I vowed. I didn't know how, but I'd figure it out. We came in through the back door, and the boys dashed upstairs to change for dinner. I crossed the empty kitchen into the dimly lit living room where April sat, keeping the room shadowed, much like the secrets she harbored. Turning on a nearby lamp and drawing back the curtains, I illuminated the space, revealing shadows that hinted at the concealed truths my once loving wife held. April looked dreadful, tear-streaked eyes, pale complexion, slouched shoulders. All the defiance had melted away, leaving behind the fearful woman I anticipated, yet it felt too late for such a transformation. Instead of offering solace, her newfound vulnerability disgusted me. Was she truly remorseful now, or simply scared? I couldn't believe such a drastic change in mere minutes. No, this was the opening salvo in our power struggle, a deceitful wife concealing her infidelity. Her face betrayed not regret but deception and guilt. I confronted her, demanding, "Who is he? What does he offer that I don't?" She remained silent until I was certain she wouldn't respond. As I turned to leave, she finally spoke. "His identity doesn't matter. It's not about you, Chris. I'm deeply sorry you found out like this. I never intended to hurt you. I never wanted you to discover this. I'm truly sorry you heard my conversation with Robin. Please, you must understand." "It's funny," I said. "No apologies for the act, no remorse for its occurrence. Just regret for being caught and for me learning the truth." I shook my head, sinking into the plush armchair she gifted me on our 5th anniversary. I once cherished it, but now it was just furniture. "Please, let me explain. Our story doesn't have to end here. We can salvage what we had if only you'd try to understand. We could move forward," she pleaded with me, a familiar expression when she desired something I disagreed with. "Can you promise it's over? That you'll never see him again?" I maintained a calm tone, but my body tensed, hands gripping the chair's arms tightly for control. April met my gaze with tear-filled eyes but offered no reply. That silence spoke volumes. She wouldn't cease. I heard her words to Robin. She sought both paths and wouldn't let me hinder her. She wasn't willing to relinquish him and sought my approval. "I believe this is your decision. After dinner, I'll tuck the boys in, then we can explore our options. Tomorrow, I'll pack my belongings and stay with my brother." Rising, I exited to the kitchen, a refuge amidst turmoil. It's odd how the kitchen becomes a sanctuary in dire times. Strange thoughts surface. When your world crumbles, it's even stranger to realize your world is crumbling. April busied herself with dinner while I spent quality time with the boys in the playroom, engrossed in their game. April called us for dinner, prompting a noisy transition as I ushered the boys to the bathroom to wash up. Mundane tasks, an anchor in chaos. Dinner was lively. The boys, full of energy, relished the meal and each other's company, contrasting sharply with their subdued parents, lost in thought over looming decisions. Ah, the innocence of childhood slipping away. Why do kids yearn to grow up? They perceive adult. Freedom is boundless, unaware of the consequences and responsibilities. Adults, however, understand. Better yet, some disregard limits and consequences, like April. Post-dinner, April cleaned the kitchen while I escorted the boys to bed. We shared stories until they settled down, drifting into slumber, where dreams knew no bounds. My heart ached as I watched, knowing this too must end. Downstairs, I sank into a chair, grasping for stability. My world slipped away beyond my control. Though I loved April deeply, her words echoed in my mind. "He never made me feel this way, and I'm his strumpet." There was no turning back from those words. As I pondered the possibilities, I felt the love within me extinguish. April entered and took a seat. "We need to talk. I understand you're upset, but you must grasp my perspective. What I share with Carl is purely physical, and the allure of novelty. I anticipate it'll fade soon, but currently I can't seem to break away. It's what stimulates me, but it doesn't affect my love for you. He's merely a distraction, nothing more. It'll end soon, and we can return to how things were. You just have to let it run its course." Her words flowed, but I struggled to comprehend. I can't resist this. I can't stop seeing him. Should I allow this to continue? Is she irrational or just deluded? Regardless, it must cease. Clearly, you're the one failing to grasp reality. There's no us, there's no we. It's just you and him, that's all that remains. It's over between us. Finished. Done. This isn't up for negotiation. I won't budge. You need to understand this. Despite 8 years of marriage, you can't possibly believe I'd condone your affair. But Chris, I love you. You're the only man I've ever loved. I don't even like Carl. Please, try to understand. Give me time. Please, baby, for the sake of our marriage and family, give me time. Take all the time you need. Tomorrow, I'll contact a lawyer, and we'll divide everything equally. I don't want to hurt you like you hurt me. I just want this to end now. Emotionally drained, I yearned to retire to bed, seeking respite from the heartache. My headache had subsided, but the anguish remained. Yet, I wasn't prepared for her next words. Then damn you! No divorce. I'll fight you every step of the way and take everything you have. I'll ensure you don't get custody of the boys, and I'll restrict your visitation rights in every way possible. If you don't comply, you'll lose everything, and I'll still have Carl. You can't stop me, remember that. I absorbed her threat. Then it struck me that this marriage had been over long ago. The level of anger and disrespect wasn't abrupt. It was calculated and deliberate. She never fretted over hurting me. If she had, she wouldn't have embarked on this path. She would have terminated it beforehand. Instead, she anticipated my discovery. Rather than ending her affair, she opted to inflict maximum pain upon me. Love had no place here, only greed and the urge to degrade me. As my anger simmered, I saw her face register that she had gone too far. Her expression, warped by her venomous words, shifted from contentment to fear. My words followed. I have one thing to say, April. When you corner a rat, it fights back. It'll fight to the bitter end if you deny it any chance of escape. You should have known that before pushing me, but now you've done it, and you'll pay the price. Please, Chris, I don't want this, but I'm left with no choice. I love you and will do anything to keep you from leaving. If you don't understand and accept this, I'll fight you. You'll have no option but to stay with me. I know you love me and the boys too much to leave. I know you, Chris, you'll stay. Goodbye, April. Let the boys know I'll see them when I can. I'll gather some belongings and leave. I'll retrieve the rest later when we can arrange a time. Upstairs, I hastily packed a bag for a day or so, just essentials from the bathroom, a few changes of clothes, not much. After 8 years of marriage, all that remained were bitter memories. But I had 2 wonderful sons, and that was my focus now. Descending, I found April seated by the kitchen door. Evidently, she was prepared to try again. Chris, please reconsider. I'm begging you. There's no need. Promise me you'll end things with him. You'll never see him again. Or just say it and maybe there's hope. I can't. I just can't. Please. I pushed past her, fighting the urge to strike her with all my might, but I knew controlling the anger inside wouldn't be easy, so I restrained myself. I'll visit in the evenings after work, so the boys won't notice anything right away. I swung open the door and stepped outside. It slammed shut behind me. As I tossed my bag into the back seat and climbed into my truck, backing out of the garage, I dialed Clyde, my brother, on my cell phone. He lived about 10 miles away. Ever since his wife left with her boyfriend 2 years ago, he'd been living alone, clueless about her whereabouts and indifferent to her absence, despite not divorcing. Clyde refused to let it hold him back. He'd become quite the drinker, often indulging with his buddies almost every night. We discussed it, but Clyde never changed his ways. He rarely got drunk, though. He was just usually high. Perhaps he was trying to bury memories. That was my take, at least. He listened as I explained and instructed me to head over. He'd be home later, so I drove to his place, retrieved the spare key from under the flower pot on the porch, and let myself in. Everything was immaculate, as always. Clyde was far from messy. He was compulsively tidy, always had been. It offered a sense of solace to see that, despite my life crumbling, his remained unchanged. I grabbed a few beers from the fridge and settled in, just as he'd advised. By the time he returned, I was pleasantly intoxicated. I fetched another beer from the store and continued drinking. When Clyde arrived, I simply informed him of the fight with April, and he joined in, drinking the remainder of his beer. To keep me in check, he assured me of his support, emphasizing our bond as brothers. The next morning, I awoke with a punishing hangover and a pounding headache. My excessive drinking was solely my doing. Despite having reasons, it was no excuse. I stumbled into the shower, letting the cold water wash away the remnants of intoxicant in my system. Staying drunk serves no purpose. I searched for Clyde and found a note indicating he was at work and would report me, which wasn't unexpected since we both had Saturday shifts. Clyde and I were employed by a company renting heavy construction equipment to major contractors statewide. Our reputation as top-notch mechanics drew customers from far and wide. Our task was to keep the machinery operational, no matter the challenges. The job demanded long hours, but provided the income necessary to support my family, a responsibility I couldn't shirk. I understood the importance of continuing to earn the money that supported April's pride and joy, the spacious house. I viewed it as a haven for our family, a source of pride in providing for them. However, April seemed to perceive it differently. To her, it was a safety net, leverage for potential divorce proceedings. She coveted the house and my earnings, not for our family's security, but to fund indulgences for her lover. Lavish clothing, trips to Victoria's Secret, lingerie purchases. I turned up the faucet to drown out these unsettling thoughts. Even though I was running late, I needed to escape to work, where I could focus, strategize, and make decisions, tasks I couldn't manage in my current state. April had clearly plotted this in advance, anticipating my shock upon discovering her betrayal and knowing I wouldn't think clearly. She had manipulated the situation to portray me as the villain for disapproving of her affair, stacking the deck in her favor. I dressed and fetched a box of large trash bags, anticipating April's departure with the boys to her mother's house. Inside, I emptied my closet and drawers into the bags, gathering essential items from the bathroom into a smaller bag. Laden with bags, I loaded them into my truck's back seat and returned inside. I wouldn't leave just yet. I intended to return after work to spend time with the children. I had much to ponder and decide. One thing was certain, my marriage was over, and April would never again be my wife, lover, or confidant. She belonged to someone else now. As I pondered, tears welled up uncontrollably, and I sank to the floor of what once was our bedroom, succumbing to grief. Loss weighs heavily, especially in the workplace. I threw myself into my duties, toiling relentlessly, even through lunch breaks, eager to drown out. Thoughts of home, wife, and children amidst the challenges of fuel injectors, timing chains, and fuel pumps. I tackled the toughest tasks without complaint, consumed by a fervor to bury myself in work. 10 hours later, Clyde interrupted, urging me to take a break. "Dude, ease up. You're making the rest of us look like slackers," he remarked, watching me with a mixture of surprise and concern. "Sorry, little brother. Just trying to lose myself in it all. Just trying to forget. My bad." I must have seemed on the verge of tears as Clyde guided me off the shop floor and into the break area. Clyde and I had been inseparable since our parents' tragic accident a decade ago. He had been my best man at the wedding, and 8 years ago, he became the godfather to my boys, Chris Jr. and Charlie. Seated at the table, I stared blankly as Clyde poured us each a cup of hot coffee, devoid of flavor but comforting in its warmth. "All right, spill it. Lay it all out." "No holding back," Clyde encouraged, prompting me to recount the ordeal in detail. For the next 10 minutes, I poured out to Clyde every ounce of shame, humiliation, and contempt April had heaped upon me. I divulged her menacing threats, her calculated attempts to undermine any retaliation on my part while safeguarding her affair. I recounted the disdain on her face as she boasted to Robin about her tryst, and the cold determination in her threats to strip me of everything. She made it abundantly clear that her lover's gratification was paramount, unwilling to relinquish him for anything. Clyde was taken aback. He had always regarded April highly, seeing her as a virtuous woman and dedicated mother. His brother had never hinted at any marital issues, leading Clyde to believe their union was solid. Now, faced with the reality of Chris's pain and anguish, it pained Clyde just to witness it. Chris was a pillar of strength, a devoted father, a reliable provider, and a trusted confidant for the guys in the garage, always there when needed. Over the years, he had gone above and beyond to help others. Yet Clyde's shock turned to anger. How could April do this to Chris? What was wrong with her? His indignation swelled as he observed his brother and closest friend, shattered and defeated. "Chris, listen to me. You can't just accept this. We have to take action. Let me and the guys lend a hand." "This is unbearable," Clyde implored, concern etched on his rugged features. It was genuine care for his brother, palpable in the air. Chris met his gaze with a despondent expression. "What can I do? If I divorce her, she'll strip me of everything. Child support, alimony, the house, the car. You know I'd never injure the kids. She's using them as pawns against me. And now that idiot she's fooling around with will replace their father. He's an idiot who thinks it's okay to bed another man's wife. I'm powerless." Clyde shook his head vehemently. "To hell with both of them. I used to love April like a sister, but she's made her bed, and now she'll have to lie in it. We need to go after both of them. First step, figure out who he is. That's the easy part. Let me make a couple of calls, then we'll discuss," Clyde declared. I simply shrugged. "All right, but I'm not sure what you expect me to do. She doesn't share anything about him with me. Doesn't matter. We'll track him down and expose him like we would anyone else. And you realize you can't take April back, right? What she did makes reconciliation impossible. If you condone her actions, she'll never respect you again. No way, man. She's someone else's plaything now. His words caught me off guard momentarily, but then a faint smile crept onto my face. You're right. She's not my beloved wife anymore. Last night taught me how swiftly love can morph into hatred, and my animosity towards her today eclipses any love I ever had for her. Last night, she stole that from me and turned it against herself. I made that clear to her. We continued chatting a bit more, then wrapped up work without any extra hours. We headed to a nearby bar with no intention of getting drunk. This was business. Plans needed to be made. Clyde made a few more calls, and we sat down to strategize. I was touched by the unwavering support from my friends. They didn't pry, just wanted to know how they could assist. Together, we devised a feasible plan. At 7 that evening, I pulled into my driveway and entered the house. It struck me as funny. This was no longer my home. It was just a place to stay. Shedding my jacket in the kitchen, I made my way to the living room. There, April sat in her chair, watching Chris and Charlie, our 5-year-old twins, engrossed in a video game. I stood there, capturing the scene in my mind forever. April met my gaze as I glanced at her, her faint smile now revealing its true contempt for me and our facade of family unity. It was all a charade, orchestrated by her deception. Now I saw and understood. I returned her gaze with a look of disdain, devoid of any smile. When I turned away, she averted her eyes, heading to the kitchen. I peered into the fridge, pulling out what appeared to be leftover fried chicken and mashed potatoes. Reheating them in the microwave, I wasn't hungry, but I needed the distraction. I had intended to speak with the boys before their bedtime, but Clyde advised against it, urging me to postpone the conversation for now. But when I do address them, it will mark the first move in the battle initiated by April. I might have lost, undoubtedly, but I would fight to the end. Seated with my plate, I began to eat slowly, the food offering little satisfaction but necessary for sustenance. About halfway through, April joined me at the table, sitting across from me. I glanced at her briefly before returning my focus to my meal, chewing deliberately. There were no words exchanged. I had nothing to say to her at the moment. Are you feeling more composed after last night? Can we engage in a civilized conversation now? Her words caught me off guard. Civilized? Adults? How about a cheating woman and her betrayed husband? That's more realistic. Opting for silence instead, I withheld my response. Are you going to ignore me now, acting childish and silent? I had higher expectations of you, Chris. We need to consider the children now. You must remember your role as their father in this household. Am I truly their father now? It makes me wonder. Maybe I should confirm with some tests. Let's keep this civil, without anger, just a simple statement. April's expression darkened with fury, poised to retort when I calmly interjected. Watch your tone, April. The children might overhear if you start shouting. Remember them? The ones you accused me of neglecting last night when I got upset? Well, now it's your turn to remember. Reflect on what you've done to their world. Not only did you indulge in an affair, you shattered our entire family. Think carefully, April. April paused, lowering her voice to a hiss. You didn't seem to consider my words last night. I expected you to move past this and return to normal. Nothing will change at home. I still love you, and you are my husband. That hasn't changed. Neither you nor the children will lose anything familiar. I keep my affairs discreet, conducting my business when they're at school and you're at work. You have nothing to lose, as I'm always here for you. I remained silent, continuing to eat methodically. I maintained a stoic expression, devoid of reaction. My eyes betrayed nothing as I looked at her. Despite the absence of verbal response, my eyes conveyed everything. Slowly, April began to grasp the gravity of the situation. For the first time, a hint of fear flickered through her. What do you intend to do? Will you make things difficult for me? I hoped you loved me enough to grant me this time alone. I told you last night that he didn't take anything from you and that I'll always support you. Why can't you grasp that? April grew increasingly emotional. While I continued to stare at her calmly, my food finally swallowed. I suggested, let's save this discussion for after the kids are in bed. I listened to you last night despite my discomfort, but I won't entertain this conversation while the children are awake. April appeared to regain her composure and resumed smiling. Thank you for that. I think you had some valid points, but your words hurt me. I'll take the boys upstairs soon, and then we can talk. She passed by me, placing her hand on my shoulder. I involuntarily flinched at her touch, causing her to retract her hand. The disgust I felt from that simple gesture was palpable. With the kids, I tried to maintain my usual self, though knowing everything was about to change weighed heavily on me. Yet, I had come to terms with the fact that April's actions had shattered it all for me. Perhaps I should just play the role of the compliant husband and accept her terms, wait until she's done with her affair. After all, hadn't she claimed she still loved me and wanted to remain married? But I knew I couldn't do it, not now, not ever again. Around 9, April entered the room where I sat, letting out a heavy sigh. She settled into a chair and smiled. I put them to bed and they fell asleep. They're getting too big to tuck in, but they still say goodnight and pretend to sleep. They're good boys. I nodded in agreement. They're wonderful kids. It's unfortunate that they'll have to endure so much pain, and I'm unsure how to ease their suffering. What do you mean? I thought you understood that nothing needs to change. Just give me what I want, and we can return to being the same family we were. Just be patient. I promised it would all be over soon. You won't lose anything. I love you deeply and want to remain your wife. It's just something I have to do, that's all. I gazed at the woman who had been my wife for the past 8 years. I married her because I couldn't imagine life without her. We had 2 amazing children and a solid marriage until last night. Now everything was different, and she couldn't comprehend why I deemed it necessary. I wouldn't delve into the specifics tonight, but I needed to be unequivocal. April, I heard you out last night. You made your desires clear. You claimed you love me and want to be my wife. You insist he doesn't take anything from me, refuse to disclose his identity because it's none of my business, and you outline the consequences if I pursued a divorce. You made it abundantly clear that you'll strip everything from me without hesitation. Just as you stated, you threatened to take everything, even my boys. That much was evident. April listened, her face displaying anger. She wasn't pleased with my recap of her words. However they sounded, they resonated differently coming from me, but she recognized the truth in what I conveyed. I perceive that you don't view this situation the same way I do, Chris. I emphasize that this isn't about our marriage, yet you didn't heed my words. Why can't you trust me when I express that I still love you and desire to uphold our marriage? What I heard from you last night, April, was disdain toward me and our marriage. When I expressed frustration, you retaliated with premeditated threats that you had carefully considered before addressing me. Disdain for me, for all my efforts on our behalf over the years. You belittled me, degraded me, threatened me, and accused me of misunderstanding. You were fully aware that I would react just as I did. Why did you presume to have already determined what to do with me? Why did you believe you had all the answers ready? Now I was starting to feel angered. Up until now, I had remained composed and in control, but that composure was gradually slipping away. April's enraged expression infuriated me.
I came to one conclusion that you seemed to overlook last night, April.
When you threatened and backed me into a corner, thinking I couldn't find a way out, I mentioned it then, and I'll reiterate it now. Even a rat will fight a cat when cornered, and with nothing left to lose. With these words, I stood up and walked away. As I approached the kitchen door where April was seated, I paused. I'm going to stay elsewhere for the night temporarily. I'll return after work so the kids won't notice anything right away. Why are you planning to stay somewhere else? Why not stay here? We can't resolve this problem if you leave, Chris. Please don't. I love you and don't want to lose you. I don't know what I'll do if you leave me. Please, Chris, let's attempt to address this. There must be a way to reconcile. I'm sorry, April. The only certainty I have now is that I no longer love you. Your infidelity last night extinguished all my love for you. That's the only thing I know for sure. I'm unsure of what I'll do next, but I'm certain there's no turning back now. Chris, what about your vows? To love and cherish me, have you forgotten them? I also recall your vows to me. You pledged on our wedding day to forsake all others, yet you didn't. You promised to love only me, but you shared what we had with another man. I cared for you, loved you, upheld our marital vows, and gave you everything I had. It wasn't sufficient. You bestowed what was mine upon someone else. You gave it away, shattering my love in the process. So yes, I can move past this. You shattered my love for you into pieces. I can depart, and I will. I headed to Clyde's house, where he welcomed me to stay as long as needed. Time to finish what we started. Soon, it'll all be over, and I'll begin anew. In the following days, I balanced work with evenings spent with my kids. However, I avoided any further interaction with April, despite her attempts to engage. I walked away each time. On one occasion, she yelled, but I simply left without a word. During a work break, a colleague informed Clyde that preparations were complete, and we'd have results in a few days. All that remained was patience. The routine continued unchanged until the following week. Each evening, I returned to an increasingly agitated April. The kids seemed oblivious, but Charlie's question about my long hours prompted reassurance. He seemed satisfied, and the momentary crisis passed. April persisted with questions, but I ignored her, leaving when she took the kids to bed. By week's end, Clyde entered the break room and handed me a folder without a word. I opened it to find a brief report. Carl Cummings, a 24-year-old junior attorney at Lincoln, Rice & Holmes. Divorced 2 years ago. Financially stable, residing in a condominium where April had visited multiple times that week. Now, armed with a name and address, I pondered what allure he held that eluded me. Yet it was no longer my concern. Had April approached me earlier, perhaps this could have been resolved differently. So, what's next? What steps should I take? I sought Clyde's guidance. Though the issue was mine, Clyde seemed the one in charge. I was fortunate to have friends and a brother like Clyde. Being a good man and diligent worker sufficed for true friends. Now I needed them more than ever. Everything's underway. The first move happens tonight. I'll call you once it's set. Just keep your phone close. You can inform her and put an end to this mess, okay? Knowing it needed to be done didn't bring relief. This wasn't my preferred approach. However, April and her lover left me no choice, and I fought back the only way I could. I wasn't a lawyer or a wealthy strategist. I was a mechanic, a hardworking individual who took pride in providing for his family through honest labor. I loved April deeply, but my efforts weren't enough for her. Fine. My plan aligned with my world, and she'd soon realize it. Returning home, I joined my family for dinner as usual. April engaged with the kids, and I participated in conversations and activities, concealing my nervousness. After dinner, I spent quality time with the kids, playing video games and assisting with homework, playing the role of the typical husband and father. April, finishing the dishes, observed the scene, seeming more at ease, perhaps thinking everything would soon return to normal. As I played video games with my boys, Carl Cummings left his office, headed to his car parked across town. He reflected on the intense encounter with April at his place 2 days earlier. She was eager for him, agreeing for the first time to get close. When he asked why, after their rendezvous, she revealed her husband had discovered their affair. Shocked, Carl was reassured by her not to worry. It struck him as odd that her husband's knowledge seemed to heighten her adventurousness. Despite this, it was the best physical engaging he'd had, so he brushed it off. Walking past an alley toward his car, he suddenly stumbled, feeling a pull as he struggled to maintain his balance and avoid falling. Someone seized his arms and pulled him down the alley toward the courtyard. Pinned against the building's wall by 2 imposing figures, one on each side, he strained to discern their faces beneath their black ski masks. Despite their intimidating size, fear began to creep over him. With little cash and no flashy accessories, he wondered what they wanted. A third masked man wearing gloves stepped forward and lifted Carl's face with a firm grip under his chin. In a coarse voice, he inquired, "You familiar with a woman named April Phillips, idiot?" The mention of her name sent a shiver down Carl's spine. Oh no, so that's what this is about. Her darn husband. She never mentioned he was involved. No. I don't know anyone by that name, he stammered, shaking yet determined to deny everything. The hefty man landed a blow to his ribs, causing excruciating pain and stealing his breath. Dizzy, he saw stars swirling before him. The intense agony gripped him, instilling deep fear. I'll ask again. You familiar with a woman named April Phillips, idiot? Unable to deceive any longer, Carl abandoned denial. Yes, I know her. Please God, let me make it out of here alive, he prayed silently. You'll never cross paths with her again, clear? The imposing figure awaited his response. Crystal clear. Got it. Perhaps it was merely a warning. Got it. He could accept that. I need to ensure you grasp this fully. My pals and I aren't convinced someone like you messing with other men's wives is all that bright. So we're going to ensure you comprehend, the big man explained ominously. Ceasing their pressure against the wall, they allowed him to steady himself. The initial blow struck him hard in the groin, causing him to double over. Despite his agony, they prevented him from collapsing, delivering another blow to his ribs. A sharp crack signaled a broken rib. Then came a devastating blow to his jaw, nearly toppling him with pain. Subsequent strikes hit him in the groin until, mercifully, he blacked out. They likely continued their assault until they ceased. Gradually brought back to consciousness, they drilled a few words into him repeatedly. His memory faded until he awoke in Memorial Hospital's emergency room. While his injuries weren't life-threatening, he was admitted to the general care unit, heavily medicated and in intense pain, grateful for his survival. He whispered a prayer. They informed him that she might contact him, instructing him precisely what to say. He recalled the words he needed to convey to her. I deeply apologize, Mrs. Phillips. It was my fault, and I deeply regret it. I will cease all contact with you and your children. I'm sorry our paths ever crossed. Farewell." Carl reclined on the bed, awaiting her call. He rehearsed these words in his mind to avoid any errors. He reminded himself that any deviation would not go unnoticed, and the consequences would be severe. Repeating the phrases to himself once more, he vowed never to pursue a married woman again, regardless of who she may be. Just past 8 in the evening, while playing with the twins, my cell phone rang. Excusing myself to another room, I took the call. Seeing Clyde's caller ID, I heard a brief message. "It's done. Lesson 1 completed. He was admitted to the hospital." Then the call ended. Returning to the living room with a smile, April noticed but said nothing, returning a smile herself, interpreting it as good news. Later, April took the children upstairs, casting a questioning glance at me. Assuring her I'd be there when she returned, she smiled broadly and went about putting the children to bed. Settling into the living room, I waited in anticipation. The moment of reckoning had arrived. As April returned with a coffee pot and cups, she suggested we talk further, noting my apparent resignation. She expressed relief, professing her love and fear of losing me over such trivial matters in comparison to our relationship's depth. I observed her as she spoke, her beauty still captivating me. After all, she was the woman I cherished for so long, envisioning a future of growing old together. But now those plans, those dreams lay shattered. Let the end commence now. "April, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully," I began. "I know your lover's name is Carl Cummings, a junior associate at Lincoln, Rice & Holmes. I know all about him, including your 2 meetings with him this week." April appeared surprised, poised to respond, but I motioned for her to remain silent. "That's the issue. You threatened me with divorce when I expressed my anger. You threatened to strip away everything I have. I remember your exact words etched into my mind. You said, 'I'll take everything you have.' You said more, but those were the words that lingered, words dripping with contempt that shattered our marriage. Those were the words that pushed me into a corner, where I felt I had no choice but to watch you engage in closeness with another man. I told you the following night that cornered rats fight back." Now I could see the initial flickers of fear and discomfort on her face. She wasn't certain what lay ahead, but she was savvy enough to realize it wouldn't be to her liking. Her shoulders tensed, and she instinctively withdrew her head in defense. "I know you told Robin that I never made you feel the way you felt with him, that you were his mistress," I continued. "I don't regret that this will end in a manner unfavorable to you. However, Mr. Cummings has been explicitly informed that his involvement with you is over. He'll never see you again or engage in any further closeness with you. Never." He was also cautioned against any contact with my sons, to which he agreed. Watching her face register shock and disbelief, I proceeded, "I'll initiate divorce proceedings citing infidelity with no spousal support for you. Child support will be provided for my sons, ensuring they lack nothing. As long as you fulfill your duties, I'll ensure you have the means, but you'll need to work for your own desires. I'll handle the paperwork and you'll be served." April rose, anger evident on her face. "You're delusional if you think I'll agree to this. And I'll take everything you have, just as I promised," she retorted, still defiant despite her fear. She intended to bluff until the very end, as she had strategized. "Why don't you call your Mr. Cummings right now? Let's see his response. Oh wait, I believe you might need to dial the hospital. That call I received earlier informed me he's in the emergency room at Memorial. I presume the news has reached you by now. Use my phone. I already have his number." April gazed at me in shock. "What have you done? What happened to Carl? Oh my God, Chris, what did you do?"
Why, April, are you seriously asking me?
"I've been here at home with you all evening, and I was at work earlier, so I couldn't have done anything to anyone. Why do you think I did something? Why would I even think to injure your lover? You made it abundantly clear that I should steer clear of this situation. It's not my concern." My demeanor surely frightened April. She had never seen me like this. I was typically calm and passive, never causing injury to anyone. I wouldn't even discipline the children physically, leaving that to her. Now, she viewed me differently. My expression was cold and stern, my eyes devoid of emotion. April entered the next room, and I overheard her speaking on the phone. She returned with tears in her eyes, collapsing into a chair and staring into the distance. I remained composed, picking up the newspaper. I knew what she had heard on the phone. Her lover was ending things with her, faced with the choice of that or enduring a smacking each time he encountered her. That was the ultimatum delivered to him by 3 imposing men who intercepted him as he left work earlier. They made it clear why they targeted him and what repercussions awaited if he dared to see or speak to April again. They ensured he fully comprehended the message. April dried her tears, took a deep breath, and addressed me. Well, it seems you've gotten your way. Carl informed me he never wants to see me again. He mentioned that all my belongings will be returned to me, and he has no desire to communicate with me. In that case, you have nothing to fret over. I have legal representation, so they will handle everything swiftly, I responded, setting the newspaper aside and rising to depart. I'll speak with the boys this weekend and explain why we're divorcing. Perhaps they're mature enough to grasp the situation. If not, they'll eventually understand as they grow older. As I made my exit, I glanced back to see April sobbing. If I recall your words correctly, April, you once claimed this affair would be short-lived and we could return to normal. I chuckled bitterly. You're still young and attractive, April. Maybe you'll find someone willing to indulge your fantasies, someone open to an unconventional marriage, allowing you to pursue multiple partners. That wasn't me, but that's just my perspective. Best of luck. Children may not comprehend this, but adults must face the consequences of their actions, and those consequences can be harsh.
After my wife of 6 years cheated, I left her and started living my best life. I'm just here to vent my frustrations and scream into the void about my current situation. I can't talk to anyone in my personal life about this. My wife is cheating on me. My wife is cheating and she has been for the past 2 months. I just don't understand. I don't even know where to start to begin to understand. We have a beautiful home, stable careers, we're not financially struggling, no drug or alcohol abuse, we attend therapy together. Our daughter is healthy, perfect. Our 6-year wedding anniversary is 3 months from tomorrow. We've been together 11 years. I have spent the last 2 days examining everything about us under a microscope, trying to find a crack where I went wrong. When did she become unhappy? When did this life, our life, become unsatisfactory for her? For her to step outside of our marriage with some random guy she met on Facebook? For her to throw her family away? I just don't understand. I found out on Monday completely by chance. My daughter's tablet was dead, so I grabbed my wife's iPad so she could watch her nighttime videos and go to sleep. My wife isn't home right now, she's on a trip and won't be back for another 4 days. I keep hearing message notifications dinging on her iPad while my daughter has it, so I took it to turn it on silent. Only to see a man's name I didn't recognize, with a little winky face next to it. I went through everything. They've done it all, met up, spent the night together, went on dates. They even have a romantic cruise planned for next month. The same cruise she told me was a bachelorette trip with one of her friends. All of these things, outings, that I encouraged. She told me they were with friends. I encouraged her. I was so proud she was getting out there and becoming more social since she expressed that motherhood made her feel like a recluse. And after digging a little deeper, all of these new friends she's been out with don't even exist. All lies. They're all characters she's created to continue her relationship with this man. I feel like a complete idiot. I never second-guessed a lie she fed me. I gave her 100% trust. We've been doing couples therapy for a year. We communicate, we go on dates, we get each other gifts, our sex life was great. I never, not even for a second, would have suspected this. I don't know how to confront her with this. I don't want this. I don't want to split up our home, but I know that this isn't something therapy can fix. I know myself well enough to know I'll never be able to trust her again. Do I just let go? Let her go be with this man who clearly makes her happier than I can? My entire existence is intertwined with her. How do I even begin to untangle that and separate? I have 4 more days to sit and overthink this. I genuinely don't know what to do. Let's see what the community thinks. First up, you have 4 days. For a lawyer to drop your divorce papers, at least have them ready and show them to her. Doesn't mean you have to follow through, but be ready to kick her to the curb. The op-ed replies, "Thank you for the advice. Calling a lawyer tomorrow." The next person says, also, look this guy up on Facebook and see if he is married or in a relationship. If he is, then get his significant other's Facebook and send her the evidence you have from your wife's iPad. The moment she walks through the door, then sit your wife down and ask her which friend she's going on the cruise with again. When she says whatever fake name, stop her and say, "Don't you mean guy's name?" and hand her printouts of the entire conversation as well as the divorce papers. Hopefully, you live in an at-fault state, so she gets nothing in the divorce. Oh, and make sure the divorce papers already have custody arrangements worked out for your child. The classic, my wife is on a cruise with a Facebook random scenario. Looks like she's been sailing on the ship of deception while you were just busy paddling the canoe of trust. So, you're left holding her iPad, not quite the magic lamp you hoped for, revealing a genie of infidelity instead. It's ironic, isn't it? encouraging her to socialize only to find out she's been socializing a bit too much with Captain Wink emoji. Here's the thing, OP. You're about to graduate from Couples Therapy 101 to Advanced Divorce Prep. Start by collecting all the evidence and, maybe prepare a surprise party for her, complete with divorce papers and printouts of her digital love letters. The look on her face? Priceless. You've got 4 days to ponder your next move. Maybe you can make a game out of it. Update. I posted here almost a month ago, venting my frustrations about discovering my wife's affair, and I received a magnitude of comments and messages filled with advice and kind words. For that, I thank everyone who took the time to comment or write me, and I'm sorry for anyone who related to my situation. I'm here with somewhat of an update, but mostly more venting. My life is upside down, and it feels good to get it all out somewhere. Sorry if a lot of this is ranting, and sorry for the length. After making my post, I took the advice of everyone and gathered up all the evidence and contacted lawyers in my area. I found a really great one and went ahead and started on divorce papers before my wife got home. I also got tested for any STIs and told my parents and best friend about the situation. I took my daughter to my parents so I could have the alone time to mentally prepare myself to face my wife with this discovery. I rage cleaned a lot. I cried a lot for those last 2 days before she got back. I packed some of her stuff but then unpacked it and cried more. I had it planned to lay out all the screenshots along with divorce papers on her dining room table and just sit and wait for her, but I didn't get the chance to do that. She was supposed to come home later in the afternoon on Sunday, but she ended up getting back around 6:30 that morning. She didn't call or text in hopes of surprising me. I was up, drinking coffee and, you guessed it, crying when she walked into the house. I didn't greet her. I just went and got the folder of evidence and divorce papers and gave them to her. I don't remember anything she said that day, but I just said I knew I wanted a divorce and I would keep the house as it was in my name solely. It hurt a lot. I wanted to hug her but also scream at her. Lots of tears from her, lots of yelling at me. I didn't say anything. I told her we could discuss it at length with lawyers present once she accepted the situation and calmed down. I think someone called it gray rock in the comments on my last post. Not entirely sure, but I tried my best to do that and not show emotion or argue with her. It was really hard. Hardest thing I hope I'll ever have to do. She betrayed me, but I still felt awful making her cry. She left that day with some clothes and personal belongings and went to her parents. My parents and best friends came to stay with me and my daughter. I had my lawyer arrange a meeting between us to discuss custody, belongings, money, everything else that following Tuesday. Well, Monday, I got a call from my clinic to come in to review the results of STI tests, and as it turns out, her parting gift to me was HSV-2. I cannot describe in words how angry, sad, and shattered I am. I'm still accepting it. I don't think I have yet, but I'm working on it. I know it's common, very common. It's not going to kill me, but it doesn't make it suck any less. I joined a support group on Facebook. Those people are great. Going into Tuesday with that knowledge was awful. I felt so much shame bringing that up in front of not only her but both of our lawyers. I knew if I tried to discuss it with her privately, it wouldn't go well, and with the amount of anger and sadness I had in my system. She never apologized. She was a different person that day. I felt like I was looking into the eyes of a complete stranger. No emotion whatsoever. Divorce-wise, everything is cut and dry. We separated finances, the house is mine. We're just waiting for the 90 days for it to finalize. There were no objections on her end, but one, she wants to terminate her parental rights over our daughter. I say wants. She is terminating rights, at least trying to. She doesn't want her anymore. Our daughter. Our baby. I was effing blindsided. I'm still blindsided. My daughter is one, but she loves her mama. Mama was her first word. She is one. It's been 3 weeks, and the pain I have felt, the pain for my daughter, for my family, has been indescribable. I don't know who she is anymore. I don't know what changed or when it changed, but it terrifies me. I feel like my entire life was pulled out from under me. I haven't talked to her per lawyer advice and my own fear of what I would say. She hasn't seen her daughter. She told me that day she didn't want to. She didn't want any pictures from our home, any memories, just her clothes and electronics. I don't understand any of it. I don't think I ever will. We have to go to court for her to petition to terminate rights, and I don't want to look at her. I just can't accept this as reality right now, not after everything. I'm trying as hard as I possibly can to keep a positive outlook on everything and be strong for my family and my baby, but this has been so hard. I hope a year from now I can look back and say I survived that, but right now it feels impossible to even see next week. I'm not suicidal, so don't take it as that. I'm just emotionally, mentally, physically demolished, absolutely demolished. Now, a quick thought from the community. Your SBX is deep in the affair fog. It is horrible to read that she doesn't want your daughter. Obviously, she cannot be bothered with her in this period of her life. She's in the way of her relationship with the affair partner. This is gut-wrenching to read. She will regret this for the rest of her life but does not know this yet. You're doing great. Finalize all the legal stuff before the affair fog lifts and find support with your relatives and friends. Stay strong. So she comes home early, probably thinking she'll surprise you with a cheerful, "Honey, I'm home," but instead walks into the ambush of reality. You, the unsuspecting barista, serving up a hot cup of "I know everything" with a side of divorce papers. That's one way to start the morning. And just when you think the plot can't get thicker, your clinic calls with a parting gift from your soon-to-be ex, HSV2. It's like the cherry on top of the world's worst Sunday. You might not die from it, but it's certainly not on anyone's bucket list. Fast forward to the lawyer's showdown. You walk in with your newfound diagnosis, probably feeling like a contestant on a twisted game show, and then the bombshell? She wants to terminate parental rights? Seriously? This woman is treating motherhood like an unwanted gym membership. Just when you think you've seen the worst, she decides parenting is too much of a hassle. Update, this is a happy update. Hi there. For anyone who has messaged me and the loads of comments I received regarding my past venting on this account, apologies first off. I genuinely kind of forgot I had it. Not much of a Reddit guy, but I've been getting into TikTok lately and saw a video about a super depressing Reddit story and remembered my own super depressing Reddit story. It's been around 8-ish months since I posted here about my upside-down situation, and a lot of people have messaged me in that time to know how I was and what unfolded. I really appreciate you strangers for all the kind messages. It genuinely means a lot, and I'm sorry I haven't replied or anything. My life has been such a whirlwind these past few months, it's hard to believe that was so long ago. To sum up the sad stuff first, my divorce was finalized without any hiccups or holdups. I'm still in the works of trying to sell our old house, but in the meantime, we've moved to a new state. My ex is still in the process of petitioning for termination of parental rights. I've only seen her 3 times since moving, and it has been to fly out for court. I was granted temporary full custody in the process, at her request and suggestion, and she was not mandated any visitation or has denied any offer of it. She has not seen my daughter in 7 months. She has requested not to. I don't know what else she's been up to or if she is still with her boyfriend or not. Since the divorce, it has been in the best interest of my mental health to keep the contact as minimal as possible, and she has done the same. I have offered many chances for her to visit with my daughter, whether it be video calls or flying out. And before we moved, I asked weekly, but it was always no. Her parents still video call with my daughter, and we're hoping they can fly out over the summer and spend some time with her. They've been cut off by my ex as well. I'm not sure what changed, but I can't change it back, and I'm accepting it. Mostly. I wish her well in all her future endeavors. Now for the happy stuff that has happened. Firstly, I'm a proud Arizonan now. Never saw myself moving here, but we have loved it so far. My parents packed up and came with us, and I don't think I've ever seen them so happy. My daughter is doing amazing. She will be 2 years old in July, and she is the smartest, funniest toddler I've ever met. She knows her ABCs, can count to 20 without help, and loves animals and bugs, especially. She thinks farts and a cow mooing are the definition of comedy, and she doesn't know this. But she has been my biggest motivator to heal from this whole ordeal and be my best self. I genuinely don't know how I helped make such an awesome kid. The more her personality grows, the more in awe I am of just how cool she is. I could talk for days about her, so I'll cap it here before this ends up being a Harry Potter-length post. As for myself, I'm in therapy and have been throughout these 8 months, and I'm in a much better headspace. I'm working on getting back on top of my health as I did put on about 30 stress pounds. I'll get there eventually, but I'm not sweating it too much. I have not dated or tried to. I don't think I will anytime soon. I've adjusted to being a single parent pretty okay for the most part. I credit that to my family and friends more than anything because they've been a huge support system throughout this. There are still really hard moments that have happened, and I know there are more to come, but I will roll with it just as I have this and hope to come out on top. This is not the end of the world for me, even if it feels or felt like it in the moment. The sun will rise tomorrow, birds will chirp, and all will be well. Thanks to my therapist for that. Those 2 sentences have helped me immensely. Sorry this ended up being so long, I should really pick up journaling. Maybe a blog or something. But thank you again to everyone who took the time to give me advice in the hardest time of my life. And thanks again if you read this, I genuinely appreciate it. One quick community comment: it's hard to imagine a mom never wanting to see her baby again. Something must have broken inside of your ex, and she will regret it immensely when she wakes up from the fog one day. It's great that you have wonderful parents who are with you and support you. Children grow up fast, so enjoy every moment with her. It's good to hear that you're doing well. Wish you all the best in your future endeavors. So, your ex is still on her I'm Too Cool for Motherhood tour, only seen her 3 times in 8 months. It's like she's doing a disappearing act. I imagine her lawyers have frequent flyer miles from all the court visits. But hey, at least you've got full custody for your amazing little one. She's counting to 20, cracking up at farts, and proving daily that genetics are truly a wild card. Moving to Arizona was quite the plot twist. Never thought you'd end up there, did you? But it sounds like you're thriving under the desert sun. Living your best life with supportive parents and a toddler who thinks cow moos are peak comedy. Talk about finding joy in the little things. Therapy? Check. Dropped 30 stress pounds? Okay, maybe that's still on the to-do list, but who cares? You're rocking that single-parent life like it's your new superpower. Not dating? Totally understandable after the emotional roller coaster you've been on. You deserve a break from the romantic chaos. How would you have handled this? Let us know in the comments below, and thank you for joining us today.
I'm a 25-year-old guy, and my wife is 27. We've been together for 8.5 years. We got legally married 10 weeks ago and had a church wedding 5 weeks ago. 2 weeks later, we went on our honeymoon. During the trip, I noticed for the first time that she was always texting on her phone, trying to hide it. When I asked, she said it was friends or her sister. This made me suspicious, and in the second week, I checked her phone while she was asleep. It was the first time I ever did that. I trusted her, but I found out she was cheating with a 39-year-old guy, a cook from her work, whom she sees daily. I didn't bring it up during the honeymoon to avoid a fight. After looking into it further, I discovered their relationship started at the end of November last year. So, after our engagement, but before our wedding, I don't know why she didn't tell me earlier when we had time to cancel the wedding. I haven't discussed this with my wife yet, but I think she suspects I know something. We still need to choose photos for our wedding album and write thank you letters for gifts. I didn't bring it up until now because of these things, but I'm dying inside and need to do something. I'm checking if I can legally remove her from our rented house, cancel the wedding, or get a divorce. We rented it together, and the contract has both our names. A relevant detail is that the other guy is separated from his wife and has 2 children in their teens. He's not divorcing her now due to loans they need to pay back. Also, they constantly talk about how much they love each other and would like to live their love fully, but they can't right now. As far as I know, the plan is for her to have children with me first, and then when he's ready, they'll get together. I feel guilty thinking about divorce 2 months after our wedding, as we had a big party and received a lot of gifts. But I can't go on like this. I don't even know what I'm expecting from you guys. Maybe I need confirmation that leaving her and getting divorced is the right thing. Thank you for any advice. Update. I talked to a lawyer in our office who doesn't really know about the matter. She gave me contact information for someone who could help. I plan to call today or tomorrow and try to meet with her soon. Update. The lawyer is checking if having another relationship is legally enough for an annulment. It's the first time someone called her so soon after marriage, and she felt bad for me. She'll let me know in a few days what options I have. Update. I can file for an annulment within 6 months of marriage. I have time to talk to the priest about annulling the church wedding. I'll take my school exams in the next 2 weeks and then discuss everything calmly with my wife. The problem is, I have no idea how to start this discussion with her. Saying, "Hey, I know you're cheating on me," sounds bad. Update. I discussed this with our priest, and apparently he can also call for an annulment. But he wants me to talk to my wife first and let her decide if she wants to stay or not. I'm not sure if I want to let her decide because I don't think I can trust her again. I don't know how to begin this discussion, and while there's never a perfect moment, I'd appreciate any advice on what to say or not say. The priest advised me not to focus on her faults, but to express how my feelings are hurt and how our marriage doesn't feel genuine. Instead of talking about forgiveness, I should discuss my willingness to help her. I need to let her know that I'm aware of her cheating, but without revealing all the details. It might be a good idea to meet with my lawyer first to understand the next steps, especially concerning our jointly rented house, before discussing it with my wife. Update. A lot has happened since my last update. I sought advice on whether to discuss the issue, go for divorce, or seek an annulment, as I shared the details of my conversations with a lawyer. The lawyer mentioned the possibility of requesting an annulment within 6 months of marriage. However, since cheating isn't explicitly mentioned in the law as grounds for annulment, a 100% success guarantee isn't assured. In the worst case, I might opt for a divorce. I also consulted our priest, who stated that, from the church's perspective, I can request an annulment anytime, provided I can prove ongoing cheating before, during, and after the marriage. I have all the evidence required for this. Upon sharing the situation with my friends, they advised me to immediately ask her to leave my home. After gathering necessary information, I had a conversation with my wife 3 weeks ago, which involved tears, some yelling, and subsequent discussions in the following days. We even spent a weekend away to talk things over without distractions. She couldn't explain why she cheated and didn't bring it up earlier out of fear of my reaction. Surprisingly, she claimed she still loved me. I asked her to decide between our marriage and the other guy and to figure out what she'd do to save our relationship. Based on her decision, I would determine whether to give it another shot or not. Initially, I was 90% inclined to leave her, and that feeling should have been 100% after a week. As she couldn't give a clear answer about choosing between me and the other guy, I made the decision for her. If she couldn't decide within 3 months of marriage, I couldn't decide to spend my life with her. 2 weeks ago, we decided to end our relationship. Interestingly, she didn't ask me to stay even once. She seemed sad about my departure, but I believe she was also happy to pursue a relationship with the other guy. I informed my parents and brothers last week, and though they were saddened, they understood it was the best decision for me. She told her parents the same day, and they kicked her out, forcing her to stay with friends. Now she has rented an apartment and is moving her belongings out of my house. In 10 days, I'll meet with the lawyer to request a marriage annulment. I need to update the priest that she moved out and then seek an annulment. At this point, I don't know what else to say. My marriage didn't even last 3 months, and my wife was almost relieved to leave me. I believe there's nothing more to discuss. It will take time to get over this, but I'm gradually adjusting to being alone and managing household tasks. Thank you for your support. Now, I have to restart my life, and hopefully, one day I'll find a girl who genuinely loves me. I'm a 22-year-old woman living with my 26-year-old boyfriend. How can I let him know our relationship is over? We've been together for 4 years and 3 months, sharing a home for almost 3. He's smart, caring, and overall a good person. However, despite these qualities, we have significant issues. First, our bed life is lacking, with closeness occurring only once or twice a month, leading to resentment on my part. I tried various solutions like spicing things up, losing weight, and taking care of myself. Despite getting attention from others, my efforts didn't work, and I've brought up the issue countless times, concluding that we're incompatible. Second, I've always been the main support in our relationship. We moved across the country because his brother lives here, and we wanted to attend college elsewhere. I looked for places to stay. We moved out twice, and both times I took care of everything, from organizing our finances to handling his documents. He had a scholarship requiring specific documents. I assisted him in getting a job, paying for his subscription to an online employment agency, and supported us when he lost his job. He's unaware of our bills and deadlines, and I feel like I have to handle everything. Initially ambitious and curious, he now seems stuck in his comfort zone. Besides the lack of closeness, we don't go on dates or celebrate anniversaries. I don't care about presents, but I wish he'd put effort into making things special, which I've done many times. He blames everything on money, but we live in a touristy city with free public transport, so there's no excuse. He prefers staying home and watching Netflix. I reiterate, there's nothing wrong with that, but we're no longer compatible. I've been contemplating a breakup for over a year, waiting for him to be stable in a job he enjoys. Despite earning less than him now, My family can support me if we break up. He is my primary concern. In his eyes, our relationship is perfect and happy, but I'm miserable. How do I tell him it's over? I've been trying to distance myself, but he doesn't seem to understand. Update. I had a serious talk with him, surprising him as he didn't expect it. Although he nearly begged for another chance, my mind was already made up. It took a few weeks to find a new place, and when I did, I left with only my personal belongings. He kept the apartment and furniture, a price I was willing to pay for my freedom. I spent 7 months single, making friends, exploring new places, and meeting someone special. We've been dating for almost 3 months now, and I couldn't be happier. My ex-boyfriend and I are on good terms, and he still texts me occasionally. He's doing fine. I'm completely worn out. The 2 weeks on the road for the launch of a new international office in London, along with a lot of travel, really took it out of me. The toughest part was being away from my girls, and the 16-hour drive home was incredibly tough. Even in first class, I hate being separated from my family. That's always been the case. However, the lifestyle I've provided for my family makes work challenging. Because of high demand, my energy company has expanded to 12 countries. 5 years ago, I bought out my partner Roger. These past 5 years have been tough but valuable. Now, with a new president in charge, I'm ready to step back and enjoy the success. While I'll remain CEO and owner, I plan to share the good news with my girls once I get home. I'm excited about having more time with my family and friends and returning to a normal routine. Don't get me wrong, I love the growth of my company, but deep down my goal has always been to spend more time watching my girls grow up and being with my wife. I'm happy to have the chance to step back and enjoy the results of my hard work at the age of 45. My life has been stressful, but it's always been filled with love and warmth. I wouldn't change a thing, and I'm looking forward to the next chapter of my life with my family. 30 minutes from home, as my driver navigated through traffic jams, I sat in the back seat of the limo, relaxing and sipping a second glass of bourbon poured from the sidebar after leaving the airport. Approaching the circular driveway, the house seemed quiet, but experience told me that in a few minutes the girls would greet their daddy and my wife would welcome me with a warm kiss, promising a wonderful night in her arms. To my horror, I walked into an empty house. The only sound was the driver placing my bags in the lobby. I called out to them, but there was no response. It was strange. The girls were always home when I returned. Hoping everything was fine, I noticed an envelope with my name, written in my wife Zoe's wonderful handwriting. Jonathan, my love, what an incredible journey we've had as husband and wife. I've cherished every minute of the last 16 years and look forward to the next 50 together. You're my whole world, and I can't live without you. Despite missing you, I've waited to express my gratitude and share something important. The other reason is something I feel a need to share. This is something that has been bothering me for the last 6 months. This is something I never expected, and unfortunately, it has become an important part of my life. Everything you've just read is true, and I speak every word from the bottom of my heart. So what I'm about to tell you is the hardest thing I've ever done. No matter how much I love you and will never stop loving you, I have to confess something. I pray that you will understand and not be disappointed in me and not leave me because of this. I've had a man for the last 6 months. I don't have any feelings or love for this man, but we have a bad relationship. The reason I'm telling you this now is because of respect and a deep sense of guilt. I can't live with this guilt anymore, and I need you to know that I've been unfaithful. You'll never understand it, but I don't feel love for him, just an attraction that I can't explain. He does things to me that I can't put into words, and no matter how hard I try, I can't stop. He has become my drowsiness, and I need him in my life. Please believe that I have done my best to keep this a secret from you and not let it affect our lives. Nothing has changed between us since it started, but I understand that it can't end soon, so it's only fair that you find out all about it. No secrets, baby. I love and respect you too much to ever do that. Please understand that my need for him is purely physical, and I will not allow my being with him to interfere with our love or closeness. I just needed to let you know that there's another part of me that I gave to another man. But this part of me has nothing to do with my love for you and the importance of our family. Family is the most important part of my life and my #1 value. Nothing will change that. Our girls are staying the night at your mom's, so don't worry about them. And they can't wait to see their dad in the morning. I'm with my friend tonight because I wanted to give you some time alone to read my letter and figure out how things will go from here. I'll be home around 10 p.m. and we can pick up where we left off, as if nothing has changed. Because nothing has changed. Dear, just remember when you read this that you are the love of my life, and I am yours until pass away do us part. I'm yours, baby, and I'll give you anything you want or need. Thank you for being you and the best husband a girl can dream of. To love always and forever, your devoted wife, Zoe. After finishing the letter, I realized that the glass of bourbon I was drinking had now become part of the next wall. I didn't remember even throwing a glass, let alone throwing it with such force that a few shards actually stuck into the wall. The ability to make quick decisions is what led me to success in business, and now I was acting out of habit. I took out a piece of paper and wrote a reply letter, sealed the envelope on the front of which her name was clearly written, and put it on the table next to the envelope that was addressed to me. I put her letter in my pocket, took some luggage, and went up to the girls' room to pack clothes for a few days. As we had a short trip ahead of us in the car, I called my supervisor and told him to prepare a corporate plane for a trip to San Francisco, where I was going to stay for the near future with my girls. At 6:30 that evening, I was driving to my parents' house to pick up my girls. I keep extra clothes and everything I need for a long stay in a corporate apartment near my California office. When I arrived at my parents' place, the girls ran out with big smiles and gave me a bunch of kisses. They were happy to see me, and it felt like my first real smile since coming home. Dad's back. We missed you, Daddy. We thought we wouldn't see you until tomorrow. Mom said you wouldn't be back until then. She was supposed to meet her friend Jamie tonight, and we came to see Grandma and Grandpa. I hugged and kissed them, tears flowing from the love and the realization that their lives were about to change because of their mom. Jamie's name caught my attention, and I stored it in my memory for a while. After the girls calmed down, I surprised them, saying we were going on a trip for a few days, flying on the company plane for a fun vacation. Convincing the girls was easy, but explaining to Mom and Dad was a different story. They felt my pain and objected until I let them read the letter. I explained I needed time to think and plan without emotions. I left a letter for Zoya and promised to call her from the plane. I assured them I'd be back within 2 weeks, and they shouldn't worry about the girls. They'd be well taken care of. Boarding the plane, the girls played around, and Jessica, a friendly flight attendant, kept them company. We've become good friends over the past 2 years. Alone on flights can create friendships. It was 11 o'clock, and the girls were asleep. The cabin lights dimmed, creating a calm atmosphere. That's when I made a call to Zoe. I informed her of my current location and the potential communication challenges due to the altitude. I reassured Zoe about having received and read her letter, mentioning that the girls were with me and would contact her in the morning. I promised to reach out to her in the next few days and advised her to contact my parents if she needed anything. As the conversation concluded, I wished her a good night. I hung up before she could respond. The flight went smoothly, landing at 1 o'clock. I took the girls to a waiting limo and later went to my house. After putting them to bed, I fell asleep without unpacking. We'll have time for that tomorrow. Jennifer, 13, and Cassie, 15, looked at me curiously after the call. Cassie, the eldest, had a sad look. She inquired if Mom had betrayed me, and her question broke my heart. Holding back tears, I shook my head and instructed them to get dressed for dinner. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I knew with love and support, they'd handle the challenges. Earlier that morning, before the girls woke up, I had a call with George, our family lawyer on the East Coast. I've known him for 20 years and told him the story without any preamble. I conveyed that I needed to understand what a divorce would look like and how challenging it might be. I expressed my desire for custody regardless of the cost and emphasized that there would be no reconciliation, counseling, or forgiveness. I wanted this over as soon as possible. The call went silent, allowing him a moment to absorb the news, probably as surprised as I was when I read Zoe's letter. He expressed his condolences, mentioning how he and Kate thought we were the perfect couple. He couldn't wrap his head around how she could do this. but he understood what I was asking. He reminded me of the prenup that Roger insisted on when we started the company, citing Roger's own experience with infidelity in his previous business. He explained that the prenup was in place and current. If Zoe had truly had an affair, she would give up rights to the kids and any financial benefits from the marriage. Over the years, while the company grew, he had maintained a premarital relationship, worked with our corporate lawyers, and placed most of our assets into a trust. I was the beneficiary, house, cars, bank accounts, investments, all under this untouchable trust. If she breached the marriage contract, she would leave with what she brought in and lose rights to the kids. While we didn't set this up for this situation, it seemed to work in my favor. George, you're right. I never thought she'd betray me. I completely forgot about the prenup. But George, all I have is a letter admitting her infidelity. What else do we need? Well, a confession on video or tape, along with photos or a confession from her partner would help. George, can you handle this while I'm in California with the girls? Money is no issue, and I want proof as soon as possible. I don't want this dragging on. There's a guy my girls mentioned, Jamie. The only Jamie I know is the tennis instructor at our country club. Can you arrange for a private investigator to start with him? I'm sure she'll contact him while I'm away. Of course. Jamie, the tennis instructor, was my sworn enemy. They were careless, making it easier for the private firm to conduct the investigation. With my consent, they placed a tracker on Zoya's car, audio recording devices inside, and video cameras in our house. All evidence was legitimate as my company controlled them through a trust. In a week, they had enough recordings and her written confession to move forward. I never listened or watched. I didn't want these images haunting me. Jamie turned out to be a womanizer, having affairs with other married women. He was younger, fit, and a favorite among the ladies in the club. Zoe was just one of his many affairs there. Middle-aged married women were easy targets for him. George called me 5 days later with updates. Jonathan, we have all the necessary evidence. What do you want us to do? Are you still going to divorce Zoe? Without hesitation, I said, draw up the divorce papers meticulously. I want her to feel the pain she caused me. I'll be at home when she's notified on Tuesday. I want to be there when she gets home. Are you sure about the divorce, Jonathan? Definitely, as we're discussing now. But I need to think about the girls and talk to her before signing the papers. It's tough, George, and I hope you never experience this. I love her, but I can't forgive what she did. Whatever you decide, I'm here to help, Jonathan. Stay in touch, and we'll keep you updated once she's notified. We got home on Tuesday morning around 9 a.m., and the girls were happy to be back. I told them that after their mom finished a tennis lesson, I wanted them to stay in their rooms while we talked. They seemed upset and worried, but I tried my best to assure them that things would be okay. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Even though Zoe was still the girl's mom, I covered the first 3 months of rent for a small, furnished 2-bedroom apartment near our house and the club. I also bought her a 3-year-old Toyota Samga so she could drive. I knew I didn't have to do all this, but I wanted my kids to see their mom whenever they wanted. The fancy cars and luxurious lifestyle were now a thing of the past. She gave up everything for some tennis player she wouldn't see again. Despite everything, I even helped her get a job at the country club. Once I dropped the lawsuit, they agreed to let go of Jamie and assist Zoe with employment. She's no longer a member of the country club, but works as a waitress there to make ends meet. It must have been humiliating for her to go from a club's famous member to one of their waitresses. Jamie had dumped Zoe as soon as the lawsuit started, leaving her with no one to turn to. The girls informed me that their mom cried every night for the love and lifestyle she gave up to satisfy selfish desires. It took all this for her to realize the mistake she made and how foolish it was to think I'd accept her selfish desires. I felt sad about how things turned out and told the girls that I still loved their mom, encouraging them to love and forgive her. They stayed close, visiting her on weekends. Later that year, during one of her visits to pick up the girls, we had our first friendly conversation. She admitted her mistakes and asked for forgiveness. Jonathan, I know we won't be together anymore and you'll never trust me again, but I want to apologize and beg you to forgive me. I now understand the hurt I caused. I used to be spoiled and didn't care about anyone but myself. I felt entitled and didn't consider how you'd feel. Now I see my mistakes and how much I hurt you. If there was a way to undo it all, I'd do it in a second. Losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I miss you and your love so much that it hurts. I've matured over the last year, and looking back, I can't believe how foolish I was. I'm sorry for ruining everything.
Before anything else, I was a man focused on work. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other and followed a simple path: school, a brief stint in college, and then work. My job wasn't glamorous, but I liked the responsibility. I worked hard, saved money, and lived a quiet life. Relationships and love weren't priorities for me. I figured it would happen eventually. Then I met Laura. She was unlike anyone I'd known, with a determination that went beyond daily life. We met through work, and casual lunches soon became more serious. Laura was ambitious, and that ambition drew me in, though I didn't realize how all-consuming it would be. I was born Leslie, a name I never felt connected to, so at 18, I legally changed it to Jacob Wagner. For 7 years, I had lived as Jacob, growing comfortable in my new identity. Life shifted when I met Laura Elizabeth Keyes during a work training session. She had an almost royal presence, and I was immediately captivated when she introduced herself. Other guys were drawn to her too, but I was the boldest, asking her out first. She politely declined, as she did with everyone else, but it only made me more determined. On the last day of training, she gave us her business card, saying we could reach out with any questions. I waited until Monday to call her, leaving a message. "What problem do I need to come up with to get you to go on a date with me?" She called back the next day, and after some playful banter, we arranged to meet in the evening instead of lunch. That's how it all began. We had dinner together every night for the rest of the week and continued this routine for 5 more weeks. We never had lunch because she trained daily from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. She was either running, swimming, or cycling, preparing for the Ironman competition. The Ironman involved a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and a full marathon of 26.2 miles, all completed within 17 hours. Laura was vegan, so our meals were mostly quinoa, kale, tofu, and other plant-based foods. It took me a while to adjust to her diet. We first made love at her house, which was more of a gym than a home, with rubber balls and weight benches as seating. Her bed was hard, but our physical connection was incredible, and it only got better over time. We had closeness whenever we could. 14 months after we met, we got married. She stopped training during our honeymoon, but resumed immediately after. One evening, she mentioned wanting to compete in the Ironman in Wisconsin, her first at that level, and said she'd need to train even harder. I couldn't imagine her training more than she already was, but she was confident. I was hesitant, as her training was already intense, and preparing for an Ironman would double the time. Soon, our expenses started increasing. About 4 months into her intensified training, she said she needed a coach. Her gym had a trainer with Ironman experience, but he was expensive. The first thing he did was convince her to quit her job and focus on training full-time, which she did without consulting me. Losing her income strained our budget. She had a good bike, but her coach insisted on more, one for competition, one for training, and even a spare. She ended up with 4 bikes costing as much as my truck. Time passed, and I decided it was time to meet Laura's trainer. I went to the gym, knowing his name was Jason Hendricks, since I'd been writing him checks every week. I saw him standing over Laura as she lifted weights. After watching them for a bit, they moved on to another exercise involving pulling weighted ropes from the wall. Laura had her back to the wall, holding the ropes, and Hendricks stood very close, facing her. I watched as he ran his hands along her arms, then cupped her chest while talking to her. "Why are you touching my wife's bosom?" I asked, startling them both. "Jacob, what are you doing here?" Laura asked. "I thought it was time to meet Mr. Hendricks," I replied. He offered a handshake, but I ignored it. "You have no right to touch her like that," I said. "I can't train her properly without it," he responded. "You need to touch her bosom to train her? What kind of training is this?" "It's part of my method." "Then we'll find someone else. You're fired," I said. "Laura, I'll see you at home." I walked out, and she followed me shortly after, furious. "You can't fire him for doing his job," she argued. "He was playing with your bosom, and you let him. He was assessing my muscle mass." "That's ridiculous," I said, laughing. "He was just playing with your bosom, and you stood there smiling." "He's not fired. I need him," she insisted. "Then you can keep him, but I won't pay for it or any of your training." She glared at me. "I'll get a job, but he stays." I paused before asking, "How important is he to you?" "Very important," she answered. "And me? Where do I rank on your list of priorities?" She didn't answer directly, but her silence and defiant stance were enough. I realized where I stood. I sat for several minutes confused. It was clear she had made her choice, which made mine easier. I went to my computer and started researching how to handle family issues. I decided to act before she did. I wasn't going to let that guy get another cent of my money. If she wanted to pay him, she could do it with her own funds. Before we got married, I had a fifth-wheel trailer I used during college summers. Laura and I had taken it to the mountains for her training, as she preferred biking and running on slopes. I went upstairs and she was in the bathroom talking to someone. I only caught, "See you tomorrow." I gathered some clothes and moved them to the trailer. On my second trip, I heard the bathtub running, knowing she'd be there for at least an hour. After several trips, I packed my computer and other personal items and spent the night in the office parking lot. The next day, I told my boss about the situation. When he asked my plans, I admitted I didn't have any yet. That evening, I returned home to pick up more things. Laura was eating a kale salad. As I gathered files in our office, she asked, "Where did you go last night?" "I stayed at the plant," I said. "Did you bring Hendricks over to evaluate you again?" "No, it wasn't necessary," she replied. "Would it have been true?" I asked. "No." After a pause, she asked, "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving," I said. "Why?" "Because you made it clear yesterday that he's more important than me. I need him to do well in Wisconsin. No other coach can help me like he does. I saw how well you two work. He touches you, and you smile." "He didn't fondle me." I shook my head. "We were a good team once. We could be again. Just give me a chance." "Will you give him up as a coach?" She shook her head. "Then I'm leaving." I packed my things and headed to the door. "When will you be back? That's up to you. Tell me he's done, and I'll stay. If not, I'm leaving for good." Without hesitation, she said, "He's staying." One of us was being selfish, or maybe both. I wanted a wife. She wanted to compete. It took me 3 trips to load the rest of my things into my truck, and she watched each time. On my last trip, she asked, "Where are you going?" "I don't know." "When will you be back?" "We've already discussed this. I'm not coming back." "Jacob, you can't do this just because of my coach. And you can't choose a coach over me." "But it seems like you are." I took half of our money, canceled her credit cards, and turned off her phone. I reminded her that bills were due and advised her to get a job soon or face financial trouble. I grabbed her competition and spare bikes from the garage, threw them into my truck, and she ran up, protesting. "You can't take them." "I paid for them," I replied, and drove off. She didn't seem to care I was leaving, but losing the bikes upset her. The next morning, I drove by the gym and saw her crying while Hendricks held her hands. I didn't know if it was because our marriage was over or because I took her bikes. I took the next day off to find a place for my trailer and got settled. Later, I told my parents everything. My mom asked if I was okay, and my dad asked if I needed money. I said yes to the first and no to the second. Laura and I didn't speak for 2 weeks until she called. She left a message, so I called back. "Where do we go from here?" she asked. "Are you still training with Hendricks?" "Yes, I need him. Then we're getting a divorce." "You can't be serious." "Have you slept with him?" "How could you ask that?" "Simple question. Have you?" She hung up. The next day, my boss offered me a position in Leadville, Colorado, and I left for Colorado the following day. 2 months passed and fall arrived in Colorado with winter approaching. A small trailer wasn't ideal for winter, so I rented an apartment and bought cheap secondhand furniture. After living in a trailer, the extra space felt odd. My family invited me home for Thanksgiving, and I agreed. By then, I had returned to my regular diet. No more quinoa, kale, or tofu. Thanksgiving with my family was enjoyable, and no one missed Laura. The day after, I headed back to Leadville. While filling up my truck, I ran into an old friend, Zeke. We caught up, and he told me he had seen Laura with a muscular guy, likely Hendricks. Over coffee, Zeke mentioned seeing them holding hands and kissing in public. While we talked, Zeke's brother called. During the call, Zeke learned that Laura and Hendricks were staying at the EMS motel. He suggested we check it out before I left town. We drove to the motel, and I parked in a distant corner. Zeke's brother, who worked there, assured us there were no working cameras, so we didn't need to worry about being seen. He also mentioned that Laura and Hendricks had been staying there because Hendricks was married and couldn't take her to his house. They usually stayed once a week, and since his wife was away for Thanksgiving, they had been there for 2 days. Zeke asked his brother for the key to their room, assuring him we'd return it quickly. M handed over the key without hesitation. The motel still used regular keys instead of electronic ones. Zeke and I went to their room, and it was clear someone had recently had closeness there. "Okay, Jacob, it's up to you now. I'll take pictures from outside, and you take them inside," Zeke said. "Are you sure M won't get in trouble?" I asked. "He owns the place. He's fine. Just do your part, and I'll do mine." The room was on the 2nd floor, overlooking a construction site. The balcony door was broken and couldn't lock. I went downstairs to ask M for a ladder, and he directed me to his shed. I grabbed a ladder, tested it, and then returned to my truck to wait. About half an hour later, Zeke called to say they were back. It was already dark, and I watched for the room's light to come on. When they didn't bother closing the curtains, I quietly walked up the stairs and started taking photos as they undressed after the gym. When they looked toward the balcony, I ducked out of sight. Laura never had closeness without a shower, so they headed to the bathroom. With the door open but the shower built into the wall, they couldn't see what was happening outside. I got to work, packing all their clothes into 2 travel suitcases. I grabbed everything hanging on the clothes rack by the bathroom, tossing it all over the balcony. I checked the bathroom for any forgotten items, even crawling in to take all the towels, washcloths, and the bath mat. I could hear them talking in the shower, but couldn't make out the words. I knew they couldn't see me because of the shower curtain. I threw everything, including the bed linens, off the balcony and went downstairs to load it all into my truck. The people in the room below watched me, but when I put my finger to my lips and mimed locking my mouth, they nodded in agreement, signaling they'd keep quiet. They were likely cheating too, so they had no reason to say anything. I met Zeke and M at the front desk, giving M the bed linens. The brothers laughed as M started printing photos Zeke had taken. Time was short, even if Laura and Hendrix took a quick shower. M had just begun printing my photos when the front desk phone rang. He winked at us when he saw the caller ID. "Reception desk," M answered. After a pause, he said, "Are you saying the ladder is still there? I'll send extra towels and bedding, but I can't help with your clothes. I'll call the police." Pause. "No police? Okay, but all I can offer is towels." Pause. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." He hung up, and we burst into laughter. I asked if I could deliver the towels myself, which made them laugh even harder. M handed me a fresh pack of towels and sheets. I went upstairs, knocked on their door, and called, "Room service." Hendrix cracked the door open. "I'll take them," he said, but I pushed past him. Laura stood there, dripping wet and trying to cover herself. They didn't recognize me until I tossed the towels to Laura. She screamed and grabbed a sheet. "I saw everything, Laura. No need to hide. Maybe your trainer should pay more attention to your pecs," I said, laughing. Hendrix stood without clothes in the middle of the room, looking confused. His upper body was impressive, but the rest wasn't, and I laughed harder. "Don't bother, Laura. I'll be in town long enough to file for divorce. Good luck in Wisconsin." "Jacob, please," she began, but I walked out. I left the door open as I walked out, and Hendrix didn't move the entire time. Laura tried calling me, leaving messages from both her phone and the motels. In her messages, she said I had abandoned her and that she needed Hendrix, first for training, then for emotional support. I stayed in town for 2 days to start the divorce process. While going through the clothes I took from their room, I found Hendrix's wallet, keys, phone, and a small black notebook with names, addresses, phone numbers, and ratings of sexual partners. Laura was rated 6 out of 10. M later told me that someone had brought them clothes after I left, and they checked out the next morning wearing ill-fitting tracksuits. The man had brought a spare key to Hendrix's car. Before heading back to Leadville, I stopped by Hendrix's house and gave his wife his clothes, personal items, and copies of the photos Zeke and I had taken. Zeke's of them entering the motel holding hands, mine of them undressing. None were explicit, but it was clear what was happening. She was particularly interested in the black book. I also handed her Laura's things and suggested she call Laura to pick them up, laughing as I left. A couple of hours later, as I drove back to Leadville, Laura called. "Jacob, you left me. Let's talk and bring my bikes when you come." She clearly missed her bikes, but I had already sold them. "Screw you," I replied, and hung up. Later, my boss was hosting a Christmas party for everyone at the plant. I volunteered to bartend since I knew the difference between gin and bourbon. The party was in full swing, and I only took one break to use the restroom. I was enjoying myself like the other guests. One woman brought me a plate of food and told me to take a break. She sat at the bar with me while the rest of the guests, about 40 people, mingled around the large basement. Some sat by the fireplace laughing while others danced. We were the only ones not joining in, me eating and her watching. "My name's Diane Webster," she said. "I've been watching you, and you don't seem bothered about missing the main part of the party." I dried my hands and shook her hand. "Jacob Wagner, and I'm probably having more fun here. You'd be surprised what people tell their bartender." She laughed. "I hear you work at the plant." "Yeah, and you?" "I'm an accountant and a neighbor, so I get invited to these parties." "Do they have parties often?" 3 or 4 times a year. They're usually fun and sometimes wild." "Is this one like that?" No, Christmas is tamer. The 4th of July parties are big, though. I haven't worked with Jonathan long, but he seems like a great guy. Oh, he and Amber are wonderful. I hadn't finished my food when a guest asked for drinks, and Diane helped serve him. Thanks, I said. You've done this before? She laughed. I've opened a few bottles. Jonathan and Amber Whitmore, our hosts, were great people. Jonathan had deep knowledge of the plant, the mine, the quarry, and transportation. I was lucky he took me under his wing, and I enjoyed working as his assistant. After I finished eating, another guest offered to take over bartending. Take a break and dance with this lovely lady, he said, pointing to Diane. I handed him my towel, bowed to Diane, and she curtsied back. We laughed and danced, staying close for 3 songs. Afterward, I told her, I should mention, I'm married, and she stepped back. Is she here? No, it's complicated, but I can explain quickly. Go ahead. We grabbed our drinks and went upstairs to the office. She sat on the sofa and invited me to join her. Okay, tell me about your marriage. I told her the whole story. When I got to the part about stealing their clothes, she burst out laughing. Once she calmed down, she asked, So, when's the divorce? I filed after Thanksgiving, so it'll take a few months. What's your story? I asked. Same as yours, except my husband didn't need a coach for his athletic accomplishments. He practiced regularly with waitresses at local bars. I never caught him, but in a small town, word gets around. That was a little over a year ago. How do you feel about life after the divorce? I asked. It's still new. We divorced 5 months ago, but the problem is that many people think being divorced means I'm available. I laughed, but I realized she wasn't someone I wanted to get involved with. We talked until Amber Whitmore told us it was time to leave. I walked Diane to her house next door, and we said goodbye with a handshake. 2 days later, I asked my boss for Diane's phone number. I can't give it without her permission, but I can give her your number and she can decide. That was fine with me. 3 days later, she called. We talked for a long time, and she gave me her number. We spoke often, and our first date was 2 days before Christmas. We had dinner, danced a little, and I walked her home. She was spending Christmas with her family, and I was alone in my apartment. Around 5:30 p.m. on Christmas Day, my doorbell rang. It was Diane. Would you like some company? She asked. I really would, I replied, and she came in with a small basket. She laid out turkey, ham, potatoes, and all the usual Christmas dishes. I told my parents you were probably alone and hungry, so my mom put this together for you. Thank her for me. It looks fantastic. We ate and talked the entire time, then cleaned up together. Later, we sat on my couch with eggnog, still talking. I found out her ex-husband worked at the best hardware store in town, and I realized I knew him from casual chats at the store. They had been married for 3 years before divorcing. He seemed like a nice guy, I said. He is. We're still friends, but he cheats, and I can't tolerate cheaters. Can I ask something personal? Feel free to say it's none of my business. Go ahead. Your ex works at a hardware store, and you're an accountant. How do you afford to live near the Whitmores? She smiled. Thanks to my grandparents. They owned the land where the area was built. My house was the first one, and was used as the model for the others. When everything was sold, they gave it to me. Great-grandparents, where do they live? They have a small ranch in Texas. They're actually at my parents' house for Christmas, and I just got back. It was past midnight when Diane decided to leave. I walked her to her car and saw about 10 inches of snow had fallen. I wasn't used to such heavy snow and worried about her driving home, but she reassured me, having driven in these conditions all her life. It's no big deal, she said while we cleared the snow off her car. The plows don't come out until about 6 inches fall. I'll be fine. She put her hand on my shoulder, pulled me in for a kiss, and said, Merry Christmas. I'll call you when I get home if you want. I want you to, I said, kissing her back. It was our second date and our first kiss. Our third date was on New Year's Eve at her parents' party. She introduced me to her family, including her brother, sister, and their spouses. The party was busy, and we didn't get much time together, so I grabbed a drink and socialized. Her grandparents had already returned to Texas, but about 50 people were there, including my boss and his wife. Well, Jacob, Jonathan Whitmore said, you must be doing something right to be invited here. I think so too, Jonathan, I replied, and his wife added, Call me Amber anytime. I didn't see much of Diane as she was helping her parents, and when I tried to assist, I was told to enjoy the party. I did, thanks to the Whitmores. They introduced me to several important community members. A young lady named Rosita Cameron, or Rosie as she preferred, stuck by me, ensuring I had food and drinks. After an hour, I was ready to escape her clingy attention. I tried to stay near the Whitmores and other guests, but Rosie wouldn't leave me alone. I managed to hide for a bit in the restroom, but she was waiting for me when I came out. Eventually, I told her I was leaving. I looked for Diane but couldn't find her, so I thanked her mother and said goodbye. Then I grabbed my coat and left. The next morning, as I made breakfast, my phone rang. It was Diane. "Happy New Year," I said. "How was the party?" "It was fine until Mom said you left. I got upset, and the party went downhill." "Why did you leave without telling me?" "The main reason I left is a young lady named Reseda. She clung to me and wouldn't let go. Every time I saw you, you were busy hosting, pouring drinks, or serving snacks. I looked for you before leaving, but Reseda was still holding onto my hand, so I left to escape her." I sensed her mood lift a bit. "Oh my God, she's a good friend of mine, and I asked her to make sure no other woman got too close to you." "Well, she did her job well. Nobody came near me, but I didn't want her to scare you off. Anyway, Happy New Year." "Happy New Year to you too. It would have been better if you'd stayed. I'm making breakfast if you'd like to join." "I'd love to, but I'm watching the Rose Parade with my family." We chatted a bit and set up dinner for 3 days later. The day before, I called to confirm she could still come. "Sorry, Jacob, something came up," she said without offering to reschedule. That evening, I remembered I needed epoxy to fix a broken lamp, so I stopped by the hardware store. There, I overheard Diane's ex-husband, David Webster, talking to a customer. "Yeah, she's coming back to me, just a couple more dates, and we'll be together again. I screwed up the first time, but I've learned. After dinner tomorrow, I'll know where we stand." The customer wished him luck, and then David noticed me. "Hey, Jacob, need help?" "Just some epoxy, the small kind," he laughed. "We barely sell the big cans." At checkout, I couldn't resist asking, "I heard you talking about dinner, trying to get back with your ex?" "Not just any ex, my ex-wife. I messed up, and I'm trying to fix it. Tomorrow's my birthday, and she agreed to have dinner with me. She used to give me special birthday gifts, if you know what I mean." He laughed, clearly implying something more. "What does she think about getting back together?" I asked. "Not sure, but we're friendly. Sometimes we have dinner or spend the night together, if you know what I mean." I got the hint and took my epoxy and change, then left. 2 days after their dinner, Diane called me. "How are you?" she asked. "Not bad. And you?" "Good overall." "So, your dinner with David went well?" "Yes." "How did you know about that?" "Does it matter? He thinks you're getting back together. He mentioned that just a couple more pleasant evenings with you, and it'll all work out. Is that true? A couple more nice nights, and everything will be fine?" "What do you mean by pleasant evenings?" she asked, her tone serious. "Dinner, dancing, maybe a roll in bed for his birthday gift. He said you always gave him nice birthday gifts, and he hinted that closeness with you was pretty good." "Jacob, that's not true." "Oh? How is it not true? Just talking?" "Yes, just talking. Pillow talk is always nice." There was a long pause, then she said, "Goodbye, Jacob." I looked at the phone and quietly said, "Goodbye, Diane." The next 2 weeks at work were a lifesaver. Our equipment was down, we were behind in production, and we were short on workers. Overall, it was a tough 2 weeks, but it kept me busy, like a cat burying its poop, and time passed quickly. On the last workday of the month, Jonathan and I, as usual, had lunch together. We ordered, sat down, and drank our coffee. "What's going on between you and Diana?" he asked. "Amber's been in touch with her, and we thought things were going well. Then Amber told me you accused her of sleeping with David. You don't have to share your personal life, but..." I took a sip of coffee. "Well, here's the story." I explained everything to him. "So you didn't directly accuse her, but you implied it, right? Just like Webster hinted to you. The issue is, she didn't deny it." "Yeah," I said. "He broke her heart once, and he'll do it again." "She's a grown woman. She'll handle it," Jonathan replied. "I hope so," I said. The rest of lunch was focused on work. Jonathan wanted me to go to Atlanta in a few weeks to convince headquarters to give us 2 more trucks for the quarry. It would be my first trip to HQ, and I was looking forward to getting off that icy mountain for a while. As I drove to the Denver airport for my flight to Atlanta, it had been a month since I'd spoken with Diana, and I had also switched hardware stores. This was only my 4th flight, and I'd heard flying in or out of Denver during the day could be rough. The takeoff proved it, with 10 minutes of turbulence, but things calmed down once we leveled out. In Atlanta, we got the 2 extra trucks, not because of my pleas, but because the numbers made it clear. I think HQ just wanted to make me sweat a bit. Jonathan suggested I visit my parents on the way back, so I did. I missed the warm southern weather, especially in February. It was freezing in Leadville, but in my hometown it was 20 degrees Celsius and sunny. My parents picked me up from the airport, and after hugs and kisses, we caught up on the latest news. We avoided talking about Laura, and my lawyer had only called me once about the divorce. Laura only wanted her 2 bicycles, which I had already sold. I decided to call my lawyer the next day to check in. After dinner, I called my friend Zeke, and we met at one of our favorite spots for drinks. He told me Laura and Hendrix had moved into the old trailer together. Their only income was from his work as a trainer, and she was still doing nothing but training. At least she was getting it for free. They had posted flyers all over town, asking for sponsors to help her get to Wisconsin in April for her Ironman competition. They even went on local TV twice, begging for money. Zeke, Em, and some of my other friends made it clear that Laura was still married to me, had cheated on her husband, and was now living with her coach, Hendrix. Hendrix's wife even went on TV to expose how she retrieved their belongings from the motel, although she didn't mention who helped her. The motel's unintentional publicity boosted business, but Laura's only sponsor remained the gym where she trained. Her donations were minimal, or so I was told, though only Laura and Hendrix knew the real numbers. There was also a rumor she had gotten pregnant, but had a pregnancy termination to avoid disrupting her training. However, it was just a rumor as far as anyone knew. The next day, I called my lawyer, who confirmed most of what I had heard. He mentioned our trial was likely to take place in April and asked if I would attend. "Probably not," I replied. "No worries. I can handle it," he said. The following morning, I flew back to Denver. Some seasoned travelers say morning flights are smoother, and they were right. No turbulence. After landing, I picked up my truck and drove home. The weather was clear and sunny, but when I got to Leadville, it was freezing cold like a witch's chest. It was too late to go to the office, so I headed straight to the best restaurant in town. I planned to have dinner, but as I looked for a seat, I spotted Diana with a man, his back to me. I assumed it was David. We made brief eye contact, and I turned around and left. Back at my apartment, I microwaved a meatloaf dinner and had a beer. As I went to bed, the mountain wind was howling. Wind speeds of 110 miles per hour weren't unusual, scattering snow everywhere. My last thought before sleep was how nice it would be to have someone to cuddle with. The next morning, my apartment was warm, but the frosted windows made it clear how cold it was outside. I hoped to avoid going to the quarry that day. Later, I stopped by Jonathan's office to tell him about my trip, and he congratulated me on securing the 2 trucks. "To be honest, I didn't think we'd get them," he said. "You must have made an impression. Great job." "Thanks," I replied, then headed back to my office to catch up on work. That evening, I returned to the cafe. Diana or not, I wanted a good meal, and their coffee was the best. I ordered and wrapped my hands around my cup to stay warm. "Can I sit down?" I heard a familiar voice ask. Without looking up, I replied, "Are there no other seats?" "There isn't one I'd like," she said. "Fine," I said. "If this place is so special, it's all yours." I grabbed my coffee and coat and moved across the restaurant. When I looked back, I saw Diana leaving. Apparently, it wasn't that special to her after all. After that, the coffee and food didn't taste as good. A few days later, Jonathan called me into his office. "Have a seat, Jacob," he said. I sat down and he started, "I'm in a bit of a tough spot. Next week, the company president, 2 senior vice presidents, and their wives are visiting. They'll stop here before heading to Vail to ski, and I want to throw a party for them. As my assistant, you should be invited. And since Diana is a good friend of my wife, she'll be invited too." Jonathan paused before continuing. "It would be better if both you and Diana came with dates. It would also be nice if Diana brought someone." I knew where this was heading. "Are you following?" he asked. "Yes, sir, I understand. Let me try to help. Invite Diana and she might bring her ex. I've heard they're getting back together if they haven't already. I can head to the quarry and start repairing one of the Cat 789S, which will definitely need work by then. That should solve your problem, right?" Jonathan smiled, shaking his head. "You've impressed me since you started here with how quickly you come up with good, practical solutions. But this is the first time you've made me think you're dumber than a truck full of rocks. The party is at my house next Friday. Wear a suit and tie and bring a date. Now get back to work." Wear a suit and tie and bring a date. He meant it. The suit and tie were easy, but finding a date was the challenge. There were only 10 days until the party, and I hardly knew any women in town. None of them were close enough to ask to a Whitmore party, and I didn't even know who was single or available. Jonathan wasn't the only one in a bind. I was too. Time flew by, and I still didn't have a date. It was Saturday afternoon, and I was in my apartment. I opened the fridge to take out the bag of chili I had defrosted earlier. I love chili and experimenting with different recipes. This last batch had turned out great. I grabbed the chili and a beer, but noticed the fridge light was off and the motor wasn't running. I opened and closed the door a few times. Nothing. I checked the electrical panel. and the fridge breaker was tripped. I reset it, but it tripped again. After a few attempts, I put the beer and chili back in the fridge, threw on my coat, and headed to the hardware store. There were 2 hardware stores in town, and I had avoided the one where David Webster worked. But the other store was closed, which was unusual for a Saturday afternoon. With no choice, I went to Webster's store. I quickly found what I needed and headed to the checkout, hoping to avoid running into Webster. Unfortunately, there he was, talking to a man I recognized as Diana's father. I had met him at a party but didn't interact much. I mainly recognized him by his distinctive curled mustache, which he was proud of. He sang in a barbershop quartet, and all 4 members had similar mustaches. I listened to their conversation. I thought everything was settled, but she stopped talking to me, Webster said. "She did the right thing," Diana's father replied. "You don't deserve a second chance. You messed up once, and none of us, especially Diana, think you'd act any differently if she gave you another chance. But who's this guy she's dating? No one seems to know him, and no one has seen them together. Is he from Leadville?" "It's none of your business, David. Just leave her alone." They finished the transaction, and after Diana's father said, "Just leave her alone," he took his change and left without looking back. Webster saw me and smiled. "Long time no see. How are you?" "Not bad," I replied. "It seems like every time I come here, you're talking about your personal life." "Do you ever discuss anything else?" He laughed. "It's a small town. There's not much else to talk about. How's your personal life? Last time we talked, you were trying to win back your ex-wife." "Not great. She's met some guy who's completely charmed her, but no one knows who he is or has seen them together." I remembered seeing Diana with a man at the cafe. "Maybe he's not from town," I suggested. "He has to be," Webster said, shaking his head. I completed my purchase, went home, replaced the circuit breaker, and felt relieved when the fridge started humming again. I heated up the chili, had 2 beers, and stared out at the snow falling, wondering who Diana's new boyfriend might be. We didn't have a long relationship, just a few dates, but I liked her. The next day, Sunday, I was doing laundry. My building only had 4 apartments and no laundry room, so every Sunday I took my clothes to the laundromat on Main Street. It was always empty when I went, and I often wondered how it stayed in business. One perk of going early was finding parking easily, as the street stayed quiet until after church, when people flocked to the restaurant next door. It was still early, and mine was the only truck parked outside. I was reading the news on my phone when the door to the laundromat opened. I looked up and saw Diana. I went back to my phone, but I could hear her footsteps approaching. She sat down on the plastic chair next to me. We stared at each other for a few moments before she spoke. "I think we can help each other," she said. "How?" I asked. "Jonathan and Amber are having a party on Friday. We were both invited, and I know they'd like us to bring dates. Why don't we set aside our differences for a few days and go together?" I thought for a moment. "What about David? Aren't you 2 getting back together? Won't he be jealous?" "Honestly, he's not the kind of person you'd take to a party like that, if you know what I mean." I listened, and for a moment I felt sorry for David. "What do you mean? David was your husband for 3 years, right? You must have gone everywhere with him. He lived in the house you're in now, and he attended the Whitmore parties with you. If he's not good enough to bring to a party, that's sad. I get that he cheated on you, but he's trying to win you back. Maybe this party is his chance to prove he's changed." She stared at me, her expression unchanged. "Are you saying I should go with David?" she asked. "I'm not sure, but it doesn't seem like you're planning to go with me." Without a word, she stood up and walked out. As I watched her leave, I realized how foolish I'd been. She had reached out to me, and I stubbornly kept pushing her away. That was pretty stupid. I jumped up and followed her. Diana, wait." She was already holding the door handle, about to leave, but she stopped. I caught up to her. "Well?" she asked. I stammered. "Come on, Jacob, speak up. But it better be something worth hearing." "I don't know the status of your relationship with David, so if I'm out of line, tell me. But here's what I've been thinking." I took a deep breath. "Laura cheated on me. David cheated on you. I'm not interested in getting back with Laura. She's happy with her coach. But David seems eager to get back with you. And after a few dates with you, I can see why. I like you more and more. Then, when we agreed to go on a date, you canceled, saying something came up. I let it go, but I later found out you were seeing your ex-husband. You told me you 2 were still good friends. I spoke to him, and he mentioned trying to reconcile with you. He even hinted, though never outright said, that you spent some very pleasant evenings together, especially on his birthday. Then yesterday, I overheard your father telling David to stay away because you have a new boyfriend. David didn't seem willing to give up. So now, I'm stuck in the middle. between your ex-husband, this new boyfriend, and the guy I saw you with at the restaurant. You suggested we go to the party together, and I thought maybe we could build something serious. But I don't want to compete, especially when I don't know the rules. With you, it feels like there are no rules, so I don't know what to do. By the time I finished, we were back sitting on the plastic chairs. She took my hands in hers. "Did you really mean it when you said you like me more and more?" she asked. "Yes. And if there was no ex-husband and no guy from out of town, would you go to the party with me?" "With pleasure." "What time will you pick me up, or should I meet you there?" "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "I mean, I have no intention of getting back together with David. The 3 meetings we had after the divorce were strictly about the divorce. He tried to convince me to give up alimony, but I won't. I don't need his money, but he'll keep paying until I remarry, if that ever happens. I canceled our date to make it clear to him that it was over. Nothing sexual has happened between us since the divorce, no matter what he might have implied. Honestly, I didn't even realize our last meeting was on his birthday. As for the out-of-town boyfriend, that's you, or was you, depending on how you want to look at it. Any questions?" she added with a smile. "Only about 3 dozen, I replied. "You can start asking them over dinner tonight. For now, your laundry's dry and ready to fold. Is 6:30 at my house okay?" "That'll be perfect," I said, still feeling a bit dazed. "Great. See you then," she said, standing up. She kissed me, took a couple of steps, then came back and kissed me again. This time it lasted longer. "I really like kissing you," she said as she walked away. I watched her leave, amazed at how quickly things had changed. I also felt surprised by my own foolishness. Why hadn't I talked to her a month ago? Sometimes men can be such fools. That night, dinner wasn't memorable for the food, but everything else was unforgettable and nearly perfect. It would have been ideal if the night ended in wild act, but it didn't. However, it ended with very pleasant kisses. On Thursday, Jonathan asked me if I had a date for the party. I assured him I did. "That's good because I hear Diana has a date too, but I expect you both to behave, okay?" "I think everything will be fine," I said with a smile. Friday night, I parked in her driveway, then walked over to Jonathan and Amber's house. There were 2 limousines and several other cars outside. I rang Diana's doorbell and smiled when she opened it. She invited me in while she grabbed her shawl. She was wearing that little black dress every woman owns, the one that makes them look incredible. "Wow," was all I could say when I saw her. She smiled. When Jonathan opened the door for us, his eyes widened. "Are you 2 together?" At that moment, Diana leaned over and kissed me. Jonathan looked at both of us and said, "I'll take that as a yes," with a smile. I was pleased when Jonathan introduced me as his assistant to the 3 bosses and their wives. The president even mentioned that I'd convinced them to approve 2 new trucks. "Yes, sir," I replied, but did you see the numbers?" After laughing and confirming that he had, we enjoyed a long, pleasant evening. The guests of honor left by midnight, and Diana and I were the last ones there at 2 a.m. Eventually, Amber admitted to Jonathan that she knew Diana and I would show up together, but just wanted to see how nervous he'd get. We all had a good laugh. I walked Diana home, and since it was late, we kissed at her door, but she didn't invite me in. My lawyer called the next day to tell me that my divorce hearing with Laura was set for April 7th. He asked if I planned to attend. Last time, I said probably not. This time, I said yes. My relationship with Diana kept progressing, though we hadn't rushed into anything physical. We were both content getting to know each other better. Then the day of the divorce trial arrived. I sat next to my lawyer in the courtroom. Laura didn't show up, but her lawyer was there. "Where is she?" the judge asked. "In Wisconsin, Your Honor," her lawyer replied. "Why isn't she here?" "She's competing in an Ironman competition." "What's that?" the judge asked. Her lawyer explained the extreme endurance required for the competition. "And she considers this more important than today's hearing?" The judge shook his head. "I can't answer that, Your Honor," the lawyer said. "I think I can," the judge replied. Before I knew it, I was officially divorced. Laura received nothing but the money I had left her. My lawyer shook my hand and told me that in a few weeks I'd be officially single. I spent some time with my family, and during that time, we heard on the local news that Laura had been disqualified from the Ironman in Wisconsin. She had completed the swim portion, but got into an argument with a judge over an equipment issue. Apparently, during the swim-to-bike transition, Laura, who placed 297th out of 1,300, dropped her towel. Her coach, Jason Hendricks, handed it to her, and she was disqualified for receiving outside assistance, which violated the rules. This enraged Laura, and she physically attacked Hendricks, blaming him for the disqualification. She was arrested and held in Wisconsin. awaiting trial. Jason Hendricks was banned for life from all Ironman competitions, and his coaching license was revoked. To make matters worse, Laura's bike was found to have damaged gears, something else she blamed on Hendricks. When I heard the news, I laughed until I nearly cried. 2 years of training, a divorce, an affair, and rumors of a pregnancy termination had led to her being disqualified in the first stage of her big competition. All her preparation, and it ended in chaos. Her beloved bikes, now useless to her. Snowstorms pounded the roads as I drove back to Leadville from the Denver airport. Diana and I had stayed in touch while I was away, so she knew about the divorce and Laura's disqualification. When I finally pulled up to my house and grabbed my bag, Diana suddenly jumped on me. After a flurry of kisses, she practically dragged me to my front door, helping me open it. We both stumbled into the living room, and she started undressing me. At first I thought she was just helping me out of my winter clothes, but she kept going. Hey, hold on a second, let me catch my breath, I said, laughing. No chance, mister, she teased. You're divorced now, and I'm going to have you until I lose my breath. I stopped her, pulling her into a tight hug so she couldn't move. I'm looking forward to this part, but what does having me until you lose your breath even mean? She laughed. I don't know, it just came out. I guess it means I can screw your brains out now that you're single. Well, that makes it clear, I said, helping her finish undressing me. Then we started undressing her. We didn't stay in our clothes for long. Soon we were both without clothes in my bed. That first moment wasn't about affection or romance. It was pure desperation, the kind that comes from two people who hadn't had closeness in a long time and were eager to break their celibacy. The next day, we both barely made it to work. Diana stayed the night, and when we left for work, we were still getting dressed. We spent most of the day talking on the phone, figuring out how we could meet again later. She had a meeting she couldn't miss, or we would have had a mid-afternoon date at my apartment. Though we couldn't manage it during the day, we definitely made up for it in the evening. I gave her a key to my apartment, and when I arrived home, she was already there, fresh out of the shower. I've never showered faster in my life. I jumped into bed with her, and our lovemaking that night was different. We took our time, explored each other, and enjoyed every moment. I studied every inch of her body, learning how to make her smile and moan simultaneously. I also discovered how to make her scream and laugh at the same time. It felt like learning the art of love from scratch. In the 5th century BC, Chinese strategist Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War on Warfare Strategies. After a week with Diana, my understanding of love had transformed. I mentally began drafting a book called The Art of Love, entirely dedicated to her. The physical connection was incredible, but it was more than just act. I loved looking at her, touching her, tasting her, and being close to her. I could always sense when she was near. My parents used to tell me that our dog, Baron, could sense when I was coming home. He'd sit by the window, wagging his tail, then run from door to door, trying to guess which one I'd enter. I felt the same way about Diana. When she was nearby, my heart would race, and a smile would spread across my face. Closeness can be described, but the sensations can't be put into words. A year after our first night together, we got married. It was a beautiful, clear, warm mountain day, unlike the stormy weather from the previous year. Mountain weather took some getting used to, but that day everything was perfect. My family came to the wedding, and just before the ceremony, my father pulled me aside. "Are you curious about what happened to Laura?" he asked. "Not really, but I'm sure you'll tell me anyway," I replied. "Well, you know about Wisconsin, right? That she attacked him?" "Yeah, I heard. She was jailed for 6 months because of it. When she got out, she came back to town, but no one wanted anything to do with her, not even Hendricks. He's still at the gym, but just as a regular trainer now, not an Ironman coach. Laura went back to her old job since she's great with computers. She's given up on training except for the annual hot dog eating contest on the 4th of July. She's probably gained 25 pounds, he added with a laugh. The world had finally fallen into place. I was about to marry the love of my life, and all the chaos from before had settled down. Diana and I would occasionally see her ex-husband, David Webster, around town, but we never spoke to him. Nearly a year into our marriage, I had to stop by a hardware store. By then, a big chain store had opened, offering cheaper prices than the local shops, which had been forced to close. I needed new belts for my sander, so I went to the chain store. While choosing the belts, someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around and saw David Webster. "Hello, stranger," he said. "Hi," I replied. "How are you?" "Not bad," he answered, wearing a vest with the store's logo. "Do you work here now?" I asked. "Yeah, this is the only job in town. The pay's good and the benefits are great." "Well, I've got what I need, so I'll be going," I said, ready to leave. He touched my hand to stop me. "I want you to know you did me a favor," he said. "Is that so?" "Yeah, I don't have to pay alimony anymore," he laughed, finding it amusing. I just smiled politely and walked away, thinking to myself, yeah, but now I get the birthday presents. As life moved forward, Diana and I settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Our days together were filled with simple joys, weekend trips to the mountains, quiet dinners at home, and moments of shared laughter over things only the two of us could understand. The chaos of the past seemed like a distant memory, one that had lost its sharp edges and faded into something I could finally let go of. Every now and then I'd catch a glimpse of Laura around town. She'd pass by on the street, or I'd spot her in line at the grocery store, her once fierce determination now softened into something unrecognizable. Hendrix was a shadow of his former self, too. They had become part of the town's folklore, a cautionary tale of ambition gone too far, of priorities twisted beyond repair. People whispered about them sometimes, but no one really cared anymore. Their drama had burned out long ago. As for Diana and me, we had built something that couldn't be touched by the past. Our love wasn't about grand gestures or fireworks. It was about trust, about showing up for each other every day, in the small, quiet moments that made up a life. The kind of love that grows deeper with time, without needing to prove itself to anyone but us. I often thought about how lucky I was, how close I'd come to letting all of it slip away. There were moments, fleeting but real, when I almost let pride, fear, or doubt get in the way of what was right in front of me. But in the end, Diana and I chose each other, over and over again, in the ways that mattered most. Our life wasn't perfect. No life ever is. We had our share of arguments and misunderstandings, but we always found our way back. Because that's what love is, isn't it? It's not about the absence of problems. It's about facing them together, standing side by side, even when things get hard. Especially when things get hard. Now, as I sit here writing this, looking back on everything that's happened, I realize something important. It's not about how you start or even how you end. It's about the middle, the messy, complicated, beautiful middle where all the real living happens. And in that middle, I found everything I'd ever been looking for. Diana and I have been through enough to know that we can face whatever comes next. We don't have all the answers, but we've got each other. And in the end, that's more than enough. As for Laura, Hendrix, David, and all the others who crossed our paths, their stories are their own now, just as mine is mine. But as far as I'm concerned, this chapter of my life, this part where I've finally found peace, love, and the simple joy of waking up next to someone who makes every day better, is the only story that matters. And I can't wait to see what comes next. What